like I said, PTSD. We're gonna jump into this. Okay. So first up, we'll do a little description of it. Okay. So basically, it's a disorder that arises after a person lives through a traumatic event, or can happen after a person lives through a traumatic event. Not everybody that goes through trauma is going to get PTSD. In fact, a relatively small percentage of people do. Actually, oh, it's right there. So yeah, a study back, coming on 20 years now, actually. I couldn't find more recent stats for it, but back in a study from 2001 to 2003 found that about 3.6% of people had PTSD. And that's everybody. That's not including just people that went through trauma. That's everybody. So I would guess that there's a higher percentage of people that get it after, or that develop this after going through trauma itself, because most of the population doesn't go through trauma, thankfully. There's a higher prevalence for women compared to men, about 5.2% compared to 1.8%. Most things I read said they don't really know why it is. What they did say, though, is that it's not due to women going through more trauma in general. There simply isn't anything to support that, you know? Yes, women typically get like sexual violence, whereas men don't, but men also spend more time in like combat and war, where less women do that. So, I mean, you can't say that one has more than the other. So it's the difference there isn't really due to that. It's something else, some sort of predisposition, or I just don't know. Couldn't say. Has that number compared to those in the military? I didn't look that up, actually. I don't know. I just looked for general stats on it. I didn't look up for people in the military. I didn't look up for like sexual violence survivors or anything. I didn't look up specific things like that. So about 70% of the people that have PTSD when this is done reported moderate to serious severity of symptoms and quality of life reduction. So it's nothing to sneeze at, you know. This is a serious disorder that really does affect people very strongly if they develop it. Some people don't, you know. Now, let's see. Dream Sandy says most traumatic experience for you was nerve agents. Oh, so you were in the military as well. I didn't know this. More so than love, lost, or other problems for you anyways. Yeah, I mean, seeing that used on people or going through that yourself would be very damaging for sure. I would expect. Very hard to see, I would think. I would guess so. We talked about this on Tuesday, but trauma or traumatic stress, you know, that usually is, I mean, I used this before, but I'll say again that all trauma is stress, but not all stress is trauma, you know? Like there's a big difference between like stubbing your toe and like losing your foot. Like that one of them, stress is stress, but it's not necessarily traumatic, you know? And what the difference seems to be, there isn't like crisp definitions out there of each, but there's a difference in salience and strength of the stress, usually due to like imminent loss of life or limb, or sexual violence, things like that, like very strong things that happen to a person. That would be defined as trauma, you know? And it is a bit up to the individual, you know? For something to be traumatic, you have to feel that it was and define it yourself as traumatic. And that may not be the same for everybody, you know? Some people are definitely going to agree that like, yeah, that was probably traumatic for a person, but it's really down to the individual to decide if it was or not for them, you know? Then again, like, it doesn't seem like it works the other way where, you know, somebody says that probably wasn't traumatic for you. You know, you dropped your car keys on the ground, that's not traumatic. You know, most people probably wouldn't agree with you that it was if you were saying it was. So I don't know. I would say that maybe there's some wiggle room in these sometimes. I don't know. I don't diagnose this stuff, and I don't pretend like I ever will. So like, I couldn't say about that. But for the most part, you're looking for really serious occurrences in a person's life to be considered trauma, and for a person to develop this afterwards. You know? And they tend to be things that are, like I said here, that are so disturbing and threatening or emotional that they kind of overwhelm your ability to cope, and it causes neurological changes after that. Long-term and noticeable neurological changes after that, for sure. All right, let me catch up here. Was aphasia impede? Yeah, language, that's the one. That was the one. You're right behind him, Ethanol. Imagine to a large extent is subjective. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, there's things that are going to be definitely more likely to cause trauma in a person, or for them to see it and define it as traumatic. It can be a car accident for a person, you know, like that could be traumatic for a person. That's pretty scary, you know. Like increased severity of the car accident is going to cause, you know, greater, I would say, likelihood of you defining it as a traumatic experience and possibly developing PTSD from it. But it can be something like that, you know. I would say a little fender bender versus like a pile up on the highway. That's different. Like I've been through a pretty major car wreck on the highway. I don't have flashbacks or have any problem driving or anything like that now. But some people coming out of that might have, you know. It's kind of up to the individual and stuff, you know. Dream Sandy said, as a kid, I remember dogs trying to chase me and eat me. I didn't like them. You know, I had a similar experience, and I also don't like dogs, you know. I don't feel like I have any long-lasting trauma due to that, but I don't like dogs, you know. It's a little something different, you know. Taxi said, I wonder what percentage is due to childhood trauma events. See, I didn't look that up either. Like I said, I didn't break this down, but that's something as well, like, you know, child abuse or child sexual abuse or any number of the things that children can go through that can also cause trauma. In fact, I was going to talk about this on the next slide when we start to look through the criteria, but the criteria we're going to go through today is for people from 6 years old to adulthood. There's a separate set of criteria for children that are younger than 6 because they can develop PTSD too, even as young kiddos, you know, which is heartbreaking, but still is what it is. So, yeah, I couldn't say tax due. I don't know. Hopefully a very small amount, but probably not as small as any of us would like to see it. Yeah, I guess Dreams Handy, sure, okay. See, Bearded Dragon said, I think I got pushed over by a dog when I was 2 or 3 years old and I was afraid of dogs till you were a teen. Yep. Then had a dog, and I quite fond of dogs. Yep, it's true. You kind of desensitized yourself a bit. I get it. I never cared to. Like, I don't want to have a dog. We did when, I mean, a dog came with my marriage, so I had one for a while. I didn't want it or like it, but it's fine. You know, he lived with us too. And he passed away last summer. Summer before last, and I don't want to get another one. I'm okay with that, you know? It is what it is. Anyways, also, this isn't really, like I said, this isn't caused by a typical life stressor. I think we talked about this on Tuesday too, but saying something like, oh, I have PTSD after that test, like that's derogatory, inaccurate. It really doesn't do people that have PTSD justice, so nothing like that. I was going to mention this later, but I'll mention it now. Like, we're going to play Darkest Dungeon after this, where, you know, characters get stressed out and end up having mental difficulties and stuff like that. They end up breaking and things like that. We're not going to talk about PTSD there. That's not what's going on there. That's not the same thing. It does a disservice to the people that have it. We're not going there. Okay, just letting you guys know. It's right up there with calling people retarded. It's right up there with saying you have OCD about things. It's right up there with like with squirrel. When you're saying you have like ADHD, like no, you don't. Stop it. Like, in my opinion, like, you don't get to talk about the experience of having a disorder unless you have the disorder. Don't even do it. Just don't even go there. Let's just try to be sensitive about this stuff, okay? So, I do see you guys took out Fabulous Feline Fencer Felicia, which means this little fat one gets a treat. Yeah, I'll get some kitty cam. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. It's a win-win-win. I agree with you, Ethanol. I mean, that there is a fair chance of that, but still, for the heroes, yeah, exactly. But still, like I said, I want to keep it classy. I want to keep it respectful, you know. Not so much that I don't think it could happen, but more, it's easy to laugh at one joke and then have it devolve, and then like, whoops, now we're being assholes. I want to stay away from that, you know. So let's go through that criteria. Okay. So like I said, we're going to talk about the DSM-5 criteria for people older than 6 years old. Because again, little kiddos have a different set of criteria. I'm not going to put both up here. most of the time, not to discount them at all, but most of the time we're talking about PTSD, it's as adults. So I think this covers the majority of what you would see with a disorder. Again, not to discount little kiddos having PTSD at all. I mean, heart goes out to them. I've worked with students like that. Yeah, I'm just not gonna go into both of those sets of criteria today. So yeah, each person that is to be diagnosed with PTSD must meet each of these criteria that we're going to talk about. Okay, so there has to obviously be some sort of stressor or some sort of trauma, right? They're exposed to some sort of trauma, like death, threatened death, actual or threatened serious injury, sexual violence, something like that. Car accidents count as well. Things, any number of things that a person could consider traumatic. In the following ways: they were either directly exposed to it, they witnessed it. For instance, one of the I used to work with a student that witnessed some violence and showed PTSD symptoms after that. It doesn't actually have to happen to you. You can just witness it instead. You can also learn that a person had trauma, and that can trigger some PTSD for you as well, it seems. Or just be completely indirectly exposed to it. If you're a first responder or something like that, and you arrive on a horrific scene, that can affect you too. That can also be trauma for you. Okay, so all of these things can potentially trigger or be a potential traumatic experience for a person. So it doesn't actually have to happen to you. Even just seeing it, hearing about it, something like that, that can also trigger these things within you. And it kind of comes down to the individual and how predisposed they are, how they handle it, how any number of different things play out. So the next criterion, there should be intrusion symptoms, usually at least one of these things. That'd be unwanted upsetting memories, just kind of not being able to not think back on the situations. May have nightmares, may have flashbacks. You may have emotional distress after exposure to traumatic reminders. So if you've been in the armed forces and you have PTSD from your time, from your deployment, and you hear like a loud bang or something like that, which isn't a gunshot, but still, like, you hear that and you might have a very, very strong emotional response to that, just because that's how your brain's wired now. We're going to talk more about that later. Also, some physical reactivity. Probably they're referring to a autonomic nervous system response, the sympathetic nervous system response, like we talked about. After exposure to those traumatic reminders as well. I'm guessing that these last two would probably go along with one another. If you're in emotional distress, and you're probably also going to have a physical stress response that goes along with that. If I had to, I do have to guess. I'm pretty sure those would happen together. All right. There needs to be something like some sort of avoidance. People with PTSD will probably try to avoid, given how they're going to feel with these kind of things going on. They're going to avoid trauma-related stimuli or triggers after the fact. They might try to avoid feelings, or just feeling feelings about it. Try to avoid thinking about it. They're going to avoid any sort of external reminders, things like that. They don't want to relive that kind of thing. It's a very harrowing experience. So, hey Evelyn, I think you know the drill. Give us a name and type of that kitty. We'll add it in chat for you. Okay. All right. In this section, you need two of these required. Okay, there's two of these things that have to be seen in a person for it to be PTSD or diagnosed that way. Negative alterations in cognition or mood, or negative alterations the way you think or your mood. So there might be some inability to recall some features of the trauma. We'll talk about why that may be later. A lot of negative thoughts and assumptions about yourself and the world. See people become very, I guess, extremely pessimistic is a way you could put it. Just have a negative sense of self, and negative, very bleak outlook, very, very cynical, things like that. They might really, really blame themselves or others for causing the trauma. Might be very, very, very much guilt-ridden or shame-ridden, or for surviving the trauma. A lot of people with PTSD feel like they shouldn't have gotten out when other people had such terrible things happen to them. There's that too. Like guilt and shame. I don't think that's mentioned in here, but that's a thing that goes along with it for sure. So decreased interest in activities, just kind of some general apathy. That probably goes along with some, that probably has something to do with the high comorbidity of depression that goes along with PTSD. Feeling isolated, like just nobody else gets it. I know that one from hearing accounts of it, and also from reading a novel from an author who went to the Vietnam War. You get back from a deployment and you kind of feel isolated, like nobody else really gets it, like nobody else is there. Nobody else knows what happens. Nobody else can know what happened, It's got to be other service members. Like they get it. People that were in an inactive deployment, they get it. Other people don't so much, So you definitely feel some isolation if they haven't been through the same kind of thing as you. And that's not just going to be in the armed forces. That can be in other kinds of situations as well, It's that feeling that like nobody else gets it, nobody else can understand, which can be very damaging because like talking about it with other people, even though they haven't been through it, can be very helpful. And also difficulty experiencing a positive affect, can be just hard to feel and show that you're happy after this. But yeah, I would imagine, I have to imagine because I haven't been through something like this, but I would imagine it's hard to put on a smile after this sort of thing, after you've seen the worst of the world, Two of those things to be considered an individual with PTSD. Okay. Let me catch up on chat here. Vegan asks, can you get PTSD from something that's not real, like a psychedelic experience or a nightmare? I don't know. I couldn't tell you, man. I have no idea. I would guess no, but I couldn't say. I guess it depends on how strongly your body and your brain are going to react to that situation, Are you going to have a full-on, very strong sympathetic nervous system response from it? I don't know. I couldn't say, man. Could not say. Evelyn wants a tuxedo kitten named Connor. We got you. We got you. I'll put that in for you right now. Ah, there he is. They just got it. All right. Here we go. Ethanol speaking up, saying, I always feel like a freaking weirdo when I try to explain to people because a lot of people just don't get it. Exactly, yeah. That's what I'm saying. And a lot of people, and don't feel like a weirdo because of it. Don't feel like a weirdo, please. Like, other people can't get certain parts of it. They haven't been through what you've been through, man. Like, it's not statistically impossible for me to walk outside with my dog right now and just get shot the fuck up. But still, like, you might feel like that's going to happen, right? I think about that like every time I go outside and try to explain to people how it feels sometimes, and they just can't comprehend the idea that someone will worry about something like that. That's statistically improbable. But you've lived through situations where that was statistically way more probable, right? And your brain doing what it does is just trying to keep you safe, Like, you have been in situations where if you walk outside by yourself or not, you might get shot, And not only does that happen overseas in armed conflicts, but that also happens in like very violent neighborhoods, That can also happen there. So, I mean, your body's doing what it's trying to do to keep you safe, which is saying, hey, that's a dangerous situation. Don't do that. But it's not anymore, And people with PTSD have difficulty turning that fight or flight response off now that they are in different situations, right? It's really hard to do. Really hard to do. I can only imagine the kind of mental and probably physical effort that it takes to just overcome that every single day, It must get exhausting. And probably with not much of an end in sight either, Like, I don't know how a person would deal with that. Hey Draco, good to see you, man. We're just getting started here, man. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. So yeah, 2 of these required, and yeah, Ethanol was just sharing his experience with some of this right here. Other people, that detachment for sure. Other people don't get it. All right. And criterion E, one of these needed. So there's alterations in arousal or reactivity. I think the hallmark one is the hypervigilance. The hair trigger, like fear response that you can go through. So let's see. That'd be some arousal or reactivity that's worsened after a trauma, such as irritability or aggression. You might just be more irritable or aggressive than you used to be, and not just like, not like straight up, not like grumpy, but like really quick to start a fight, or like really quickly like raging upset over like nothing, you know? It's harder to control those kind of things when you have this disorder. Risky or destructive behavior, that can be a thing for sure. Hypervigilance, that's a big one, where you're just constantly like on the lookout for danger. You'll react really quickly to like to small sounds. I think yeah, that's a thing that can happen as well. Heightened startle reaction, where you might get very, very startled from what most people would consider a very innocuous stimuli. A loud bang or something like that might send a person with PTSD running or going for their gun or hiding or something like that, because dude, like, they've been through some serious shit. I have difficulty concentrating. One, we're gonna talk about a couple reasons why, but one, there tends to be some reduced executive function in people with PTSD, and also a lot of rumination, a lot of thinking back on the things that happened, a lot of time spent in the past on that traumatic experience, as much as they don't want to be there, and that saps your concentration as well, you know. Difficulty sleeping, you know, probably because of the aforementioned, you know, nightmares, night terrors, things like that. So also, these things have to be going on for longer than a month, you know. If it's been less than a month, they might, I would guess the doctors might tell you to give us some time, see what happens. Sometimes like people that go through a traumatic experience can have some of these things happen to them, some of these criteria, but then it goes away, you know. So it's got to be going on for longer than a month. And then of course they have the functional significance like they have with every disorder. It's got to have some sort of impairment in your social occupational functioning, something like that. And then again, of course, it can't be due to any sort of medication or substance use or anything like that. So, Bearded Dragon said, I'm recognizing some of these symptoms, but I don't think I have PTSD. Well, good. I think that to hear people tell it, you'd know. If you had PTSD or you suspected you had it, you would freaking know. So I think if you feel like you don't, I don't know. If you're concerned, of course, see a doctor, but it sounds like this is the kind of thing where if you got it, you know. Just gonna put that out there. And to say, I think one of my favorite lines from Band of Brothers. Okay, this is a very war-based movie or show, not movie, that you may or may not have seen. Which, in of course, Ninja's opinion, everybody should watch. So the report said a buck got taken off the line for a bad case of trench foot. Truth was, he just couldn't take seeing his friends all tore up. Nobody ever thought any less of him for it. Yep. So, I mean, this kind of thing has been happening, or PTSD, as we know it, has been happening for a very long time. They used to call it shell shock, because they just didn't have a better way to describe that. We kind of hypothesized on stream before that it probably happened back in, like, medieval times, too. But, like, they didn't have a way to describe it, you know? They didn't know what it was, you know? People weren't really thinking about this kind of stuff as much back in medieval times. But, I mean, like, anytime you're around people dying in front of you, I mean, or hearing about it, or just in a place where it happens, I mean, this kind of thing can happen, you know? Your body can have an overreactive fear and stress response to ultimately try to keep you alive. You know? There's nothing wrong with you if this happens either. It's just, this is how your body reacted, and it can be changed, you know? There's a reason that they put people into therapy for this kind of thing, because they believe it can be changed. Like, you don't go to therapy for, like, things that can't be changed about you, you know? Like, they don't put, well, I don't know if they do or not. I was gonna say, I don't think they put a schizophrenic person in therapy. I don't know, maybe they do, but you don't hear about that as much as you do medication to kind of manage the symptoms. You don't put a person in therapy for epilepsy, because at least I don't think you do. You'd be much less likely to do so, because it's not going to help the person. You know, you give them medications to manage it or look at surgery, but you don't put them in therapy for that kind of thing, you know? People with PTSD will go for that because that can help them, you know, as can medications and things like that also. Yeah, dream sanity. Gotcha. So there are subtypes of PTSD here. Okay, there is a newer dissociative subtype. So in addition to meeting the qualification for the diagnosis, there may also be some what's called depersonalization or derealization. So I think that the person, they might experience things as looking at through the eyes of an outside observer instead, or kind of detached from oneself while remembering the incidents, or while having flashbacks or anything like that. Might feel like that's not really happening to them, or as if they're in a dream or something like that. Just a further, I think, removal from the situation, just to try to keep one's mind and body safe from that harm. And then there might be some derealization, where there might be like distortion of it or something like that, or like that, you know, that's not a real thing that happened, or this isn't real. Any of those things. This guy right here. This guy. Dream Sanity, welcome back to the neural net. Good to see you, man. Second month. I love it. Welcome on in. She-Dork said, I so appreciate you covering this topic. Awesome. I'm glad. I appreciate you being here. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. And I can confirm personally that seeing a psychotherapist that specializes in trauma/PTSD does help. Good. Yes, I think that's definitely a thing that every person with PTSD probably ought to do. I would also say that it's probably never an easy thing to do. Just like it's not easy to go see a therapist if you have anxiety or depression or anything like that. It's just hard to go do that kind of thing. I can't say it's harder for one disorder than another, but yes, absolutely very, very helpful, I would say. I'd say that many people that I've heard of going to therapy say it really changes their life, you know? And I can imagine it's the same way with PTSD. Oh, Dream Sanity, I see that. I will check it out later. Thank you. Got it. Let me catch up here a little bit more. Thank you guys for welcoming Dream Sanity in with those hot emotes. I love it. Pleasure to have you back, Dream Sanity. Always appreciate you, man. Vegan said, can you see PTSD if you take someone's brain post-mortem? We're going to talk about that a little bit. There is one hallmark change in PTSD and there's some other changes as well, but those aren't as, you know, hallmark, I guess. Those aren't as telling as some other ones. We're going to talk about that. So I don't know if you would see like, you know, like grossly different things. They usually look at this kind of things like fMRIs and stuff like that. But there is one hallmark change that is different about a person's brain with PTSD versus without. Good question, Vegan. I like how you're thinking about this. All right, and also quest time for whoever's ready. Exclamation point quest to get this little fat boy right here, a quest. And also session long kitty cam brought to you by Dream Sanity. I appreciate you, man. Gerbo's in. Good to see you, friend. Oop, try again, Gerbo. You misspelled quest. I know you want to jump on that thing. Good to see you, friend. All right, so complex PTSD isn't actually a distinct subtype in the DSM-5 yet, but it's sounding like it'll probably be added in the future. So basically, this is PTSD that's brought about by repeated trauma, like over a long time. So like prolonged abuse, being held prisoner, things like that, can bring about complex PTSD. Basically, it seems to just be a stronger, more pronounced representation or presentation, I guess, of PTSD. And it might come in with increased feelings of guilt, shame, worthlessness, things like that. Feeling like things might be your fault. I would guess that Stockholm Syndrome can kind of go along with that if there's another person or a captor involved. But yeah, it just seems to be just an amped up, a stronger version of PTSD, you know? Which I'm guessing that anybody that has PTSD will be saying, there's a stronger version of this? Oh my god, why? But yes, there can be an even stronger, I guess, representation or feeling or experience of PTSD as well. If you go through that just long-term, very, 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 very abusive situations. So, like I said, that doesn't have specific criteria listed out yet, but it looks like that'll be something they consider in the future for sure. There's already research denoting some of the differences between the two. I'm not going to go into like neurological differences today because that's still being done, but just to let you know that that's something else that's out there as well. Okay. ICD-11. No, we haven't been talking. Oh, there actually is complex PTSD in ICD-11. Yeah. Like I said, I'm just going off the DSM still. DSM and ICD tend to do some similar stuff. It looks like ICD gets the ball rolling a bit faster. Let's look at DSM. They're both totally useful. Yeah, Gerbo, so DSM is usually usually written and gone through by the APA, the American Psychological Association, or American Psychiatric Association. I'm not sure which one it would be. Probably a combination of those two. The ICD is done by the World Health Organization, so it's more international, right? And they tend to have a little different symptoms for different things, but overall, many of the same disorders are in both. They tend to have similar diagnoses, similar symptomology and stuff like that, but ICD is a little bit ahead sometimes. That's all. Yep. That's all. Just another way to look at it. And I do see you guys took out Maine Coon Manny, so let's get a little oxytocin fix here. Little fat boy gets a treat. You guys get some kitty cam. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. It's a win-win-win. And there's our Discord, if you guys are trying to join us over in the Discord to share some adorable pet pics, and some science, and some memes, and some positives for everybody, and some uplifting experiences as well, and also a place to vent to people if you need to do that. We're there for all those things, so feel free to come join us if you want. And it said often pets who are rescued from animal abuse. Oh yeah, scared of people. Yeah. You know if that is clinically PTSD? I don't know how that would compare to like the human presentation of PTSD, but like it's probably similar if I guessed, and I am guessing. I don't know if they diagnose animals with PTSD. I couldn't say. The internet might tell you more than that. Just be careful of your sources. But it wouldn't surprise me either way. I mean, in my opinion, very similar, you know. But I couldn't say, man. Dream Sandy says ICD coding is used for all diseases. Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. There's the biological diseases in there too. That's true. Good point. Yes. So ICD is then, I guess, more complete in that regard. But then again, like in America, we have like, you know, other classification systems for those biological disorders as well. But this is an international one, so everybody kind of has a standard reference to go off of. That's all. Anyways, those are the subtypes that I know of for PTSD. Ooh, Dream Sandy shares an old friend had a depressed dog, needed SSRIs. Expensive dog. Yeah, I guess so. But hey, if you love your pets, you're gonna do some stuff like that for them, right? We gave our dog medication for a while. I would give Fats medication in a heartbeat if he needed it. Yeah, he's 13. He might need something like that in the future. I'll pay for it. But anyways, come on back, Fats. Oh my gosh, I'm over here sitting there talking about how I'm going to give you medication and stuff, and you're running off. Being a freeloader, man. Come back. I love you. Little Fat Boy's going to be healthy forever? I hope so. He is just turning 13. He's been an old man for a while. Yeah, he won't be with us forever, but hopefully, if he makes it to like 15 to 20, dude, I'm freaking super stoked, dude. I got a lot of time with this guy. He's had a good life too. But anyways, so there's 5 kind of broad areas of dysfunction in PTSD that I found, and we're gonna go through those and also talk about kind of the broad areas of the brain that are hypothesized to kind of be affected during this time. We're also going to talk about 3 different brain networks that are involved in PTSD, and some more neurological tidbits that go along with it as well. And then, like I said, we're going to get to other types of treatments that have been in the literature as well, beyond you know, standard therapy and SSRIs and stuff like that. Okay, that boy get his treat? Indeed he did. Indeed he did. So the first area, general area of dysfunction in PTSD is fear dysregulation, right? So it's not that you don't feel, well, some people might not, I guess, in PTSD, but usually there's an overactive fear response. But I guess it could go the other way too. I mean, nobody's going to say it can't. There's just a dysregulation of the fear response. And I put in here this quote from the author Robert Sapolsky, who wrote the book Behave, which is an amazing book that I would recommend many people read. If you're at all interested in human behavior or neuroscience, anything like that, it's an amazing read. I freaking love it. I think he's done a TED Talk too. I meant to check on that today, but I forgot. But yes, very good stuff. But this quote in his book really stood out to me, so much that I actually remember it, unlike most of the other things. But it says, we don't passively forget that something isn't scary anymore. We actively learn that it isn't, right? So basically how that kind of applies to PTSD in my mind is that you can't just kind of hope it goes away eventually. You know, you really have to go do something about it, whether that be go to therapy, get some medication, kind of force yourself to take approximate steps towards becoming less and less fearful of the things that used to make you scared before. You know, any number of those things can be done to help you, but it's not going to go away on its own. You know, the fear responses tend to stay with you until something is done to change those. You know? Absolutely, Gerbo. I hope you enjoy it. The middle layer of the meninges is definitely not the mid meninges or the middle meninges. Nope. Yeah, vegans got it. It's the arachnoid. That's the one. Remember that from yesterday? Good. That's the whole point. I'm glad you remembered that. The mid-lingies. I love it. Nice one, Ninja. All right. So, like I said, I just wanted to include that quote. I feel like it's definitely pertinent here. So, fear dysregulation, there's kind of an inability to control those fear responses. There's hypervigilance, okay, to threats or perceived threats. There's difficulty with what they call the fear extinction process. So like some of us earlier were talking about, hey, you know, like I got, you know, had some bad experiences with dogs when I was growing up, and now I didn't like them for a while, but now I do. That would be called the fear extinction process, you know, where like you had a bad experience with something. You really were cautious of it, you were fearful of it for a while, but you know, now you don't feel that same way anymore. That's the fear extinction process. But that's very, very, very difficult for people with PTSD, because the fear response is just is too damn high, and they can't. It's very hard to even begin to think about it in a way where they can stop being scared of it. You know, it's hard to like imagine it or think about it or be around anything that reminds them of it in the first place. Like how do you extinguish that when the fear response is so strong? You know, which is why some of the reasons that for different types of therapy we're going to talk about later. Oh, he just do that, Gerbo. He likes to, just loves to stare at the wall sometimes. I think he thinks there's interesting stuff there. I don't know. This is heightened stress sensitivity as well. People with PTSD can get stressed very, very quickly. And also poor regulation of other strong negative emotional responses. So not just fear, but also anger, sadness. Any of those negative fear emotions can be very, 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 very difficult for a person to manage with PTSD. For understandable reasons. So this is thought to be because of what we call neural dysregulation between our frontal lobes, specifically the medial prefrontal cortex, the part of our cortex right in the middle of our prefrontal cortices. So if you think about looking at a brain from the front, there's that split. Be the parts right to the sides of those splits. Okay, and also the dorsal, so top, and then lateral prefrontal cortex, so the middle part and also the top side portion. Okay, there's thought to be dysregulation between these areas and the fear and arousal system in the amygdala, insula, and hippocampus, which I believe we've talked about before when we talked about the amygdala, but the frontal lobes can kind of help to manage that fear response. You know, normally if like there's a loud sound or something scary on you, you might hear it and you might get startled, but then you can say, oh, it's just this, it's okay, right? Then you can think through that and say, that's nothing to be scared of, I'm okay. But a person with PTSD has vastly more difficult times doing that, right? Like they hear a loud sound or something that reminds them of that traumatic experience, and they can't say like, no, it's fine, there's nothing wrong, I don't need to be scared. Like they're already moving, acting, running, hiding, getting guns, like fighting, whatever they need to do to stay safe. So their frontal lobes just can't get in there and shut that response down. So it's very, very difficult for them, you know? Very difficult. And that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult. One, they have an overactive fear response, but then two, like the other parts of the brain that are supposed to shut that down also just can't get it to it in time. So tough stuff. Ninja, love it. Always with the Bloodborne jokes. I expect nothing less at this point. More about that fear dysregulation piece, okay? There is a Oh yeah, the hyperactive medial PFC is hyperactivity in the medial prefrontal cortex is implicated in the new dissociative type of PTSD also, right? Which we talked about earlier. That's PTSD with kind of accompanied dissociation, or feeling like that's not really happening to you, or you're viewing through someone else's eyes, or it's not real, things like that. So there can be increased activity in the medial prefrontal cortices and also the limbic system, but there's just less of a connection between those two things as well, so that those prefrontal cortices aren't able to mediate the response in the limbic system still, even though it is itself overreactive. That, and we don't really have every neuron in the brain mapped out, so overreactivity may happen in the prefrontal cortices sometimes in some contexts, but then not in other more beneficial contexts, such as tamping down that fear response. It's complicated, you know. This is just general kind of associations right now. Oh indeed, Ninja. Oh indeed, I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it on the 22nd, man. All right, so dysregulation between the medial prefrontal cortices and the hippocampus, or hippocampi in this case, I suppose, in most people's cases, that can cause is thought to be the cause of the difficulty with extinguishing the fear responses. Okay, in more safe environments, right? So during therapy, during some exposure therapy, if you go through that, I don't know if they do that with PTSD, but you know, or in a safer, more generalized environment, like Ethanol was talking about earlier, right? Just walking outside of his house feels like he might be shot by somebody, because he used to be in a situation where that could have been true. That was more probable to be true, you know? So now he thinks just taking his dog out for a walk, somebody might shoot him. So, and you know, he's been back for a while, and it's harder for his brain and his mind to say, like, no, that's not going to happen. This is a safer situation. I'm okay here. Whereas, you know, a typical person that hasn't been through a traumatic experience wouldn't have a problem with that. And that's kind of where that lack of understanding piece comes in too, you know? Like, you're experiencing something that's so strong and so visceral to you that other people simply can't understand. You know? Gerbo said, does this have any similarities with anxiety, the dysregulation? It might. It might. I think I talk about that later. I'm not sure. I may, or maybe I talked about it Tuesday. But there might be dysregulation between the frontal lobes and limbic system for anxiety as well. Like, I haven't looked into that as much as I would like to. I do plan to have an anxiety talk later, and maybe I'll find something about that when I do. I'll definitely report when I do, for sure. All right. So yeah, and another frustrating piece is this whole dysregulation of the fear response can kind of, I guess, make therapeutic endeavors a lot more troublesome, you know? A lot more slow going, or feeling like nothing is happening, you know? Because, like, you don't want to go relive your trauma all the time if you feel like it's not going to help, or that progress is very painstakingly slow, you know? It takes a lot of willpower to get to work yourself through this kind of thing. Rook said anxiety talk later? How much later? No, oh my gosh. Stop. Welcome in, Rook. Good to see you, man. Good to see you, dude. How are you? So this may also have this may have to do with dysregulation of the dopamine and norepinephrine systems as well. Fear association can be kind of modulated by this, especially norepinephrine, which really sharpens your focus and causes you to focus in on things, especially dangerous or fearful stimuli. So, and there does tend to be some dysregulation of those neurotransmitters in the brains of PTSD patients also. So, a lot of stuff going on that makes a lot of this stuff difficult. So. All right. What's this? Hey, Dream Sandy, what is that? I don't have time to crack that open right now, but what is that you posted? All right. So another area of different dysfunction doesn't mean like broken so much as it just means working differently, working in what's perceived as a maladaptive manner, right? So I don't want that to come off as people with PTSD have a broken brain. Nope, yours is just working differently due to an extreme circumstance that you were in, okay? So when we talk about area of dysfunction, it's a different thing. See, in Japan, a schoolgirl was caught by the police for putting a link to a website with an endless loop of alert in JavaScript. So this is regarded as crime in Japan. So let's be criminals and get arrested, enjoy criminal life. I don't know what that has to do with what we're doing, what we're talking about right now. So, there's also some attention dysregulation that goes along, just some differences in the attentional system that can happen. So attention can really be easily hijacked by people with PTSD due to that, again, that disconnection between the frontal lobes and limbic system, where that fear response is going to be very strong. It takes your attention away. That's the hypervigilance that goes along with PTSD can really have a lot to do with this, or can take a person's attention away. I got Dream Sanity. Let's try to keep the links to, like, what's relevant. It is posted down in the links down below. It should be relevant to what's going on. Okay, I'm actually gonna go ahead and take that one out. Let's get that out of here. Yeah, links should be relevant to what we're talking about. Gerbo, right on that neuroscience question. Good on you, girl. I love it. Awesome. All right. So again, this attention dysregulation, that kind of goes hand in hand with that hypervigilance. Okay. Also, difficulty with disengaging or shifting your attention away from something that you do perceive or have perceived as potentially fearful or dangerous or whatnot, right? And then also that heightened avoidance of those perceived threats. Think back to the symptoms we talked about earlier, the diagnostic criteria. That kind of goes along with it too, right? So this is is thought to kind of go along with ventrolateral. Now, the other part of the prefrontal cortices, it kind of has to do with the prefrontal cortices all over, all the prefrontal cortex. Okay? And also another part of the brain called dorsal anterior cingulate cortex dysfunction. One of the jobs of the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, which I don't have a picture here of, unfortunately, but you can think of it sitting right on top of the corpus callosum. It's just that little strip of cortex that goes right above your corpus callosum if you're looking at a hemisphere of a brain. Okay. But some dysfunction between the prefrontal cortex and the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex is thought to drive this hypervigilance. Okay, and one of the things that the dorsal anterior cingulate does is all the sensory information that kind of comes to your brain through the thalamus and all that is kind of vying for your attention at any one point in time. One of the things that the DACC does is decide what you focus on, or decide what's important enough to get through to the frontal lobes for conscious thought. Okay, and so there's dysregulation of those two different things, and it can be hard to stop thinking about things that really aren't relevant anymore or shouldn't be relevant, but you still feel like are very, very relevant still, or to shift your attention towards something that you need to be focusing on instead, So also, they're thinking the hypervigilance might be due to some upregulation of serotonin levels in the brain, which seems counterintuitive because usually you give that to people that are depressed or want to. I don't know. It seems like it's different, which is, I don't know. It seemed counterintuitive to me, but one thing we've learned is that different neurotransmitters have different functions and at different levels in different parts of the brain, and serotonin dysregulation might have something to do with the attention dysregulation that you see in PTSD. So we're going to talk about that in a bit, Dream Sanity, for sure. Absolutely. Good question, man. I like it, Gerbo. And also, quest time for whoever's ready. Vegans say, can you cure PTSD by destroying parts of the amygdala with focused ultrasound? I would not think so. No, No, I would think that that's going to do more damage than good. There's already such widespread and profound changes in a person's brain with PTSD that you don't want to destroy more. No. That's like that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater, dude. That's like using a frontal lobotomy to manage schizophrenia and stuff. That doesn't help the person. That just makes them more manageable. Nah, I don't think that they would ever do that kind of thing. Ooh. Gerba said, one of my friend's fiance took or takes antidepressants for seizures. Okay. Yep. Like I said, there can be a lot of different effects of different medications, so, and different neurotransmitters, Yeah, Rook, exactly. About the only time they're going to look at ablation is for is for intractable seizures, intractable epilepsy, where like medication's not working. They're going to go in and see if they can get away with destroying a part of the brain, and hopefully it isn't anything important for you. They usually test beforehand to see if it's important or not. And if it isn't, if you're deemed that, you know, it's not going to have a serious impact on your quality of life after that, then they'll go ahead and do it, you know. That's how patient HM came about, where he had both of his hippocampi destroyed, because that's where his epilepsy was stemming from, and he couldn't form new memories after that. You know, so they're very cautious with that kind of thing nowadays. I would say that destroying parts of the brain are typically going to be a very, very, very last resort for a person. So, is calcifications not a candidate for ablation? I would think that that's probably very hard to control. Not nearly as focused. So, oh wow, Gerbo, all right, I get it. Yeah, kind of like that, Gerbo. And that's happened. That happened in. Oh gosh, I forgot her initials now. But when we were talking about the amygdala, that happened to the woman that quote unquote had no fear. Like, she had her amygdala destroyed because of calcification in the brain, and she literally had no fear response. Like, she couldn't even have a concept of fear anymore. You know, which ended up being very dangerous for her. Like, that's another thing. You know, like the fear response is meant to keep you safe. So like even people with PTSD, you know, you don't want to get rid of their fear response altogether, because then they're in a different set of troubles, you know. That woman that had no fear response, like, was in trouble a lot because she couldn't feel that she was in fear and needed to do something about it, you know. Like, that's never going to be an answer, in my opinion. I do see that you guys took out Fang the Panther Disciple, which means this little fat boy right here gets a treat, and you guys get some kitty cam. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it, I appreciate it, you all love it. It's a win-win-win. Oh goodness boy. Oh goodness boy. Rook said, I mean, the brain's so complex, and most of the fine working points of the brain, the destroying parts of the brain, will likely have unforeseen consequences. Again, yeah. They're definitely, I think, better about knowing what's going to happen beforehand, or at least trying. They're better about, if they're considering ablating a part of it, they test and see what's going to happen if they take it out, see what your quality of life is after that, or while it's shut down, they'll go in and either chemically or transcranially, magnetically shut down that part of the brain and see how you function, you know? If you're okay, then they can consider it. It's always up to the patient, I would think. If you're definitely not okay during that procedure, they ain't gonna do it, you know? And yeah, there could be other consequences too, beyond what they see there or what they don't see there. Exactly. What a large lad he is indeed. Also a total freeloader. That's killing me. Oh, I'm hoping there's never another chomp like that, Ninja. That was bad news. He tasted blood. It's only a matter of time. No. It's kind of like a test drive, Gerbo. Exactly. Yeah, kind of like that. That's the kind of brain surgery you're awake for in TV shows. Yeah, yep. They would keep you awake for that kind of thing because they have to interact with you. They have to talk to you, see what your language functionings are like, give you some commands, see if you can follow them. I don't know if they have you get up and try to walk around, but they might have you do that too. I don't know. They're going to try to do as extensive testing as possible and see what happened. Oh, he did, Evelyn. He got me good. Got me real. There's a clip of it. The latest clip over in the clips section will show you. It was real bad. I don't know if you're awake for all brain surgery, Ninja. I could be wrong about that, though. I know you're awake for a lot of it. I don't know about all of it. I don't know. Couldn't say. I think you actually, yeah. I haven't actually heard of a type of brain surgery where you're not awake for it. No, I have. I have heard of that. There was a guy with a... There was a guy on YouTube who had a brain tumor, and kind of documented his experience with that. And he was put out for his surgery because he said he was put out for a surgery. So I'm guessing that for certain types they keep you awake. Other types they don't. I don't know. Come on, Pats. Anyways, Frozen? Oh, I don't know about that, Gerbo. I don't know. Ninja say, yeah, it's kind of haunting to see people awake during surgery, I would guess. Yeah. A lot of time, if you're a professional musician or something, they'll have you play your instrument during the surgery. That makes sense. That's good. So they can tell if there's a difference in your ability to play, you know? Yeah. Absolutely. Because, you know, being able to play a musical instrument and all that, we don't know where exactly that lies. You know, that's a very complex procedure. Don't know what, there's no specific point in your brain that says, yes, they can play a musical instrument, don't touch. That's a whole, that's a most of the brain procedure right there. So any one part being damaged could have an impact on that. Anyways, the next broad area of dysfunction in PTSD would be recurrent memories or dreams. Again, very similar to what the criteria say. You're killing me. Oh. So again, no surprise, this might be due to that dysregulation of the prefrontal cortex, this time the ventromedial, or the bottom portion and middle portion, and the hippocampus. The connection between those things might be dysregulated, and that might be the areas of the brain might be causing those recurrent memories and dreams. Okay. Let's see. There's kind of the line of thinking that the traumatic experience that one's been through wasn't able to be consolidated efficiently or effectively. Remember back to our talk about sleep and dreams and memory, that when you're asleep, the hippocampus kicks off a process called consolidation, where widespread long-term potentiation happens in the cortex. You kind of solidify those long-term memories so that you can recall them later, you emotionally process them and all that stuff, and you move on. But that process is kind of dysregulated in people with PTSD, so that traumatic memory is very, very difficult to process fully and store and assign meaning to and then move on from, you know? So your brain kind of keeps coming back to it and back to it and back to it, trying to consolidate that and work through it, but since its ability to do so is impacted, you kind of keep re-experiencing it, you know? And there also may be some difficulty with the content of new memories being consolidated effectively as well. So. And also sometimes new memories can be encoded without the right amount of detail and context and all that stuff. So there could be some misinterpretations there and things like that, which is another reason why it's important to kind of go back and or I would guess you do this during therapy, go back and try to think through some of those situations and stuff like that. But again, due to that fear dysregulation, it's very, very, very difficult to do so. It's another case of, just like in things like depression or anxiety, oftentimes the best thing for you to do is go do the thing that you don't want to do, you know? It's probably eventually going to be the same thing here with PTSD, is, you know, try to deal with the trauma, process the emotions, process the memory, and hopefully put it behind you eventually. But again, last thing you want to do. I would imagine it's the very last thing you want to be doing. Yeah. So the detail-oriented memory being consolidated is kind of mediated again by medial prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. And again, that connection can be dysregulated in people with PTSD, leading to these difficulties. Gerbo said, do recurrent dreams tend to indicate something your brain is struggling to consolidate? Maybe. They might. I couldn't say. I'm not I guess, knowledgeable enough to say for sure, but it could be. Well, that, come on over. And just said, a side note, I recently studied that artist, gnarly dude. I'll bet. I don't know whose art that is, but to come up with something like this, I would guess so. This painting is titled Nightmare. Found it on the Wikipedia. But yeah. Thank you, boy. Alright. Another area of dysfunction would be differences in self-perception, right? We talked about that in the diagnostic criteria as well. People with PTSD will often blame themselves, feel really, hey, calm down. Let's not have another incident like last night, please. Hey, be nice. They may have a lot of feelings of guilt, shame, depression, just low self-efficacy, things like that. And especially in comparison to others, you know, if they have to compare their abilities or their situation or themselves to others, they often view themselves very, very negatively, you know. And I guess that in the case of complex PTSD, it's even more pronounced. And I think this is a hypothesis. I didn't see anything in research that says that, but I would guess that this has a lot to do with the high incidence of comorbid depression that goes along with this. Just if you always feel like you're inferior to other people and like you're broken, you did something wrong, things like that, you're probably at high risk for depression, I would guess. You know, I don't think that I don't think that those two things are unrelated. But again, that's me putting pieces together. That's not me having read that in research anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if it was there, but I didn't see it. I didn't look for it. And this might be possibly due to that dysregulation between the medial prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate. Noticing some patterns here. Kind of all seems to be centered around the same brain areas: prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate, the limbic system, hypothalamus, or not the hypothalamus. We're going to talk about the hypothalamus a bit later, but the amygdala, hippocampus, the insula, which we're going to talk about again right now. We pointed that out again yesterday on the cranial nerves talk. That's basically, there's the lateral fissure on the side of your brain that separates your temporal lobes from your parietal lobes, and that's kind of, there's an infolding of cortex inside of that you can't really see unless you kind of crack open the brain and look. But that cortex inside of there, that's the insular cortex. And there's, with people with PTSD, there's increased insular activity, and that can be associated with really those negative interoceptive feelings of, you know, shame, guilt, sadness, things like that. And that's kind of what the insula does, is it helps us to feel as bodily states, especially how we're feeling our emotions, and especially even more so those negative emotions. They often see that there's an overactive insula in people with depression as well. Let me catch up on the chat here. Oh, the person that did this painting was Henry Fuseli, huh? I probably said that wrong. Henry Fuseli. Fuseli? Probably Fuseli. Oh, you took an art history class as part of your curriculum. Gotcha. Yeah, it's kind of like I took a jazz history course as part of my curriculum, and I don't care about jazz. It just worked with my schedule, and it happened to fulfill a requirement. I'm not gonna... I don't remember anything from it. I didn't want to take it. But, you know, you still walk away with like a little bit of knowledge, right? Maybe fats is underestimated, overstimulated? I don't know. 1 second. I'll be right back. Sorry, Mrs. Beta's having an intense phone call out there. I want to make sure she wasn't able to be heard. Anyways. Cool, Nedge, I'm glad you enjoyed that part, man. It's good. Gerbo said, my brain's so overactive. Imagine how much exercise it's doing, right? Exercise will help with that. Hey, it's not showing up in my chat bot for some reason, but I see that guy, Griff Thingy. Coming on over with 8 friends, dude. I appreciate you, man. How the heck are ya? We get a shout out for Griff Thingy, please. Go check him out sometime. If you want to see Twitch's best or only Red Panda playing some different games, doing some Twitch things, talking about mental health as well, go check him out sometime. Good to see you, man. How are you? How are you, Griff? Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. We're here talking about PTSD. And yeah, all the different things that can go along with it, then some of the neuroscience behind it as far as research is concerned, or at least the research that I saw. Yeah. Gonna introduce myself? I'm gonna do it right now. Yeah. My name is Ina Beta, for those of you guys who don't know me. We talk about neuroscience at the beginning of the stream 3 nights a week, and then the rest of the time for the entire 4th session and the rest of the night on those 3 nights a week when we're done talking about neuroscience. That was a very long-winded way to say that. We also play some strategy and story-driven games. So right now we're talking about PTSD and what that is, how it's defined, how it's classified, how it's or what's happening in the brain during it as far as research is concerned. And we're going to talk about some potential ways outside of therapy and medication that is being considered to treat it later as well. And then after this, whenever we're done with this, we're going to play some Darkest Dungeon as well. Okay. But this is the primary focus of the stream. Neuroscience pieces last anywhere from an hour to up to 4 hours. They've gone as long as that before. I'd say an average an hour and a half to 2 hours usually. So yeah. And we also support closed captioning. We do. I want to make this accessible to everybody, you know? So one great thing I got out of being a part of the YAM fam, I feel like, is the kick in the butt I needed to get there we go, those over there going. Is there's a member of our community or a member of the YAM fam who was part of the DHH community, and I wanted to make sure that, or that ultimately was like, oh, okay, I really need to do this, you know. If I want to get to know that person better, I want to make sure that they can access my content as well as me being able to access theirs. So that's what really ultimately made me do it. So, you know, that's the one good thing that came out of that for sure. One of the many good things that came out of that. Anyways, thanks for welcoming in those raiders, Gerbo. I appreciate that. Anytime we get raided, guys, I love to see that emote spam in our channel. It can be some of our emotes here in the neural net, or it can be any emotes you like to use. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter who it is at all. And also, thank you for whoever connected with us. I appreciate you. Thank you. It was Snickers Wolf. Thank you for connecting with us. Appreciate you. Griff said, I'm trying a new tool for closed captions. This one's an extension. I got it. You can activate it at will, resize letters, and move the closed captions around. Oh, good. They made it that way. Okay, cool. I know that there was an extension out that you couldn't resize or move or anything, and it was like just right in the center of the screen. So like it kind of sucked. But I'm glad that you found one. Can you send me information about that Griff thingy? I might be interested in that. If it's, I mean, I have this all set up now, so I kind of just use that. But yeah, I appreciate that, Griff thingy. Thank you. Yeah, I'd be interested in looking at that. That way, people that want it off can have it off, and people that want it on can have it on. I would prefer that if I can get that set up right. Also, there's the next neuroscience question. What is the area of a neuron that the action potential travels down? Close, Ninja. Close. Close. He's getting there. There it is. All right, it's axon. It should have given you the first one. I don't know why it didn't. Is it? Is that shut off? No. You should forgive small misspellings. I don't know what happened. That's weird. Oh well. It is what it is. Let's see. Let me catch up here. We're all caught up? We're all caught up. Anyway, so that's the kind of third area of dysfunction in a person who's experiencing PTSD. They have a lot of those recurrent memories and dreams. Okay. The next one, oh yeah, that's the fourth one. Differences in self-perception. We talked about that. And you might notice these are kind of going along with a lot of the symptoms or the criteria, diagnostic criteria we talked about earlier. And another one, the last one, difficulties in interpersonal attachment or coping, or for coping rather. As I was saying, one of the best things that you can be doing as a person with PTSD is connecting with other people. Even if you feel like they don't get it, even if you feel silly explaining it to them and like they just haven't experienced something similar, just connecting with other people and that kind of thing, it goes miles, does wonders. It really does. Even if it's the last thing you want to do, Just like people with depression. If they're really depressed, the best thing to be doing is get up, go outside, talk to people, enjoy a social life, like stick to those routines. Like that's the best thing to do. And it's also the absolute last thing you want to do, but it does a ton of good, Exactly, Griff thingy. Totally. It does. So, but that's one area of dysfunction for people with PTSD is that they have difficulties with using these kind of interpersonal relationships for coping. I would say that that's not just for PTSD, that's for a lot of disorders, honestly. But anyways, so like we talked about earlier, when we had an example from our friend Ethanol as well, but trauma makes it more difficult to kind of benefit from those potential attachments from people and stuff like that when dealing with those negative events, because you just know deep down they don't get it. They weren't there. They don't understand. And because of that, you might have some negative feelings about that, trying to connect with them, But again, these the close relationships that you can totally foster, whether that be going to a support group, whether that could be connecting or reconnecting with family, anything like that, extremely important in recovering from PTSD. Let's see. Close attachments can help kind of reduce the threat vigilance, for sure. Like if you feel safe with other people, that definitely reduces that threat vigilance. And also kind of increase activity beneficially in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an area that we talked about was dysregulated. And yeah, that's the part that's really key for emotional regulation and tamping down that fear response, and also bumping up that fear extinction, right? So the interpersonal connections can really help build that. One thing that happens to a brain when strong interpersonal connections or quote unquote bonding is happening, or you're around people that you feel very close with in the first place, is that oxytocin levels go up. And oxytocin levels combat a lot of the these areas of dysfunction in PTSD. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. Oxytocin's being looked at for possible treatment regimens as well, and other things as well. Like I said, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that more later when we talk about those other types of treatments. But bumping up a brain's oxytocin level is very, 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 very effective, or very important. No, Griff thingy mental health doesn't need to be taboo. No. I think this one is especially taboo in an area or in a population where it happens the most in the armed forces, you know. But a lot of things that I've been reading is that some people within or areas of the armed forces are starting to try to come around to this more because they're losing a lot of career soldiers when they could be keeping them in if they just took care of them, you know. So it's something that's hopefully changing for the better, and sooner rather than later, you know. Let me catch up with chat here. Gosh, I feel like I've developed a stutter. I didn't used to have one. This is crazy. Oh well. Anyways. Griff Thingy says, oh, about the closed caption. Yeah, it's a good mix. Yep. Even people that don't belong in the to the hard of hearing or deaf community want to use those captions still. It's true. Yep. If they want to have a low volume or something, they want to have captions on instead. Yep. Or if you're like Mrs. Beta, you like to have the captions on even though you can hear it. That's easier for you. She ain't got no hearing problems, but she just prefers it. There you go. Gotcha, Griff Thingy. Good. Well, hopefully you benefit from this talking, and if you need to go back and catch about the first half of it, it's available in VOD. You get it. And thanks for sending that to me, Griff Thingy. I appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, it's Gooseman's. Yeah, he's part of the TKF. Or he's part of the Knowledge Fellowship. Cool. Yeah. I know he was getting that off the ground, but it was still kind of being developed still. Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. Vegan said, is connecting with other people on the internet count? It can, Vegan. It can. It's not... There's been research done on that there isn't as much of an oxytocin release in people if you're like texting with them or seeing them over a medium like this than as compared to seeing people in real life. But it's better than nothing, you know? Absolutely. See, Bearded Dragon said, I'm recognizing a lot of these symptoms. I think I'm going to have to sit down and think on this at some point in the future. Okay, I mean, yeah, if that leads you to diagnose something and get some help in the future, Bearded Dragon, I'm glad. Please do. Like, never be afraid to look at this kind of stuff, you know? If you're seeing a lot of this stuff and feeling like it's really impacting your life, like, talk to somebody about it. Literally nothing wrong with doing that. It might feel like there is, but there's not. Yeah, Griff. I get the sense that he feels like doing that. Yep. Nodelecta, hey, welcome back in. Good to see you. It's been a while. How are you? Yeah, the self-fulfilling prophecy of cutting yourself off socially because mental health is huge and important to tackle. Yes, it is. It is. Because, I mean, you can say there's not a stigma all you want, but as long as you feel like there is one, then you're going to act like there is one, you know? Even if nobody else around you is making you feel that way or doing anything that should make you feel that way. A lot of mental disorders, I can speak from the perspective of depression, like, it makes me feel that way. It makes me feel like nobody wants me around. Like, people don't like me because of my depression. Like, people don't like me because I'm me, you know? I totally get that. When I'm depressed, like I was last night, like the last thing I wanted to do was stream. But I did because, like, I knew, one, I wanted to keep that routine. I wasn't going to let it beat me. And two, like, I knew once I started talking, I was going to feel better. Not because I'm there, like, having you support me, but because just the act of talking makes me feel better, you know? I knew it would, and it did. I feel just fine now, you know? Absolutely, Gerbo. I got you. It's just, I know logically deep down it's my dumb brain talking, but it's so hard to fight it when you just feel it with every fiber of your being in those moments, dude. Oh, it sucks. It sucks so bad. Oh my gosh. Ninja, oh my god, stop. Don't look up stuff on WebMD. In case you guys didn't get it, he's obviously trolling. Yes, exactly. Indeed, Griffin Nodelecta, it sucks that this kind of stuff is still seen as taboo. It shouldn't be. By anyone, ever. No. Oh, you read this OxyContin? Yeah, Oxytocin, OxyContin do get mixed up, yeah. Oxytocin is a naturally occurring neurotransmitter in your brain, or neurohormone, I guess specifically. OxyContin is like an illicit drug, not illicit drug, but a habit-forming drug that they prescribe for, I don't know, pain or anti-anxiety. I don't know which one it is, but yeah, they're different things. Like Rush Limbaugh used to be addicted to OxyContin for a while, I believe. But yeah, totally different things. Not at all related except for the fact that they are spelled somewhat similarly. That's it. I do see you guys took out Fabulous Feline Fencer Felicia, which means this little fat statuesque buddy right here gets a treat. And you guys get some kitty cam. It's an opiate vegan. Thank you. Thank you. I couldn't recall. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. It's a win-win-win. Vegan said, I've heard oxytocin's released when you pet an animal. It can. I'm sure I get oxytocin released from this little fat guy all the time, dude. Can it be an alternative to human relationships? I don't know. I'm sure there's research out there on that. I don't know. I couldn't say. I don't know if there's going to be as strong of a oxytocin relationship or a bonding between, you know, different species versus our own species. I couldn't say. It's definitely something to check out. No, Delecta saying a big, I think one of the big things those of us who have experienced mental health problems and are comfortable talking about it can do to get rid of the remaining stigma is simply be open about it in our mental health histories. Totally. There shouldn't be anything wrong with sharing your experience on that. You might, I mean, I think people feel like there is. I had trouble doing that. It's one of the reasons I went on Anxiety's talk show and said like, hey, I'm gonna go talk about this with everybody. And I felt like way better afterwards. As like my depression hasn't been nearly as strong since then, you know? I've told some people in my life about it, but just being on camera and talking to a lot of people about it, I felt way better about it for sure. Chris said, this requires a change in our culture. Yeah, we'll take time, but moving some stones now sets the foundation for tomorrow. Ooh, I love that saying. Yes, absolutely, Griff. For sure. For sure. Got you. the chomp did not help me feel better. There was an endorphin release from that. That's about it. Absolutely. It's true. It's true, Griff. Yep. Talking about it and bringing attention to it definitely helps. Note Alexa said, oh, I've been kind of busy, not in a great mood recently. Kind of oddly for the topic tonight. Okay. Been struggling more and more with research and PTSD symptoms. Okay. Cropped up about a year ago when I went back to the job where my trauma happened. That makes sense. Absolutely. Yep. Haven't been around as much as many streams, and as I used to be in general, just not here. Oh, that's okay. No worries, Note Alexa. If I comment that like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, I'm never ever trying to tell anybody like, hey, where have you been? You're supposed to be here. More just like, hey, it's good to see you. Like I've missed you. I'm glad you're back. Never like you need to be here, ever. So I'm sorry to hear that you're going through that trouble, Note Alexa, and I hope you learned something here tonight, and I hope that you continue to fight what's going on in the future and know that you can overcome it. Okay, or at least get it under control and live with it. And I would imagine that, yeah, going back to the job site where your trauma happened is going to bring back a lot of stuff for you. Just what we've been talking about says that, yep, that's going to happen. A lot of overactive fear response is going to come right back. The hypervigilance is going to come right back. Not only are you in a similar situation, you are at the same situation. I can imagine that's very tough for you, man. And my heart goes out to you. Absolutely. Oh yeah, different dream sanity. It sucks, right? I hear you. I hope that you're able to get yourself up and out of there soon, man. All right. Oh yeah, there's the next neuroscience question. Where do association fibers connect? Talking about the hemispheres, right? Those fibers are often talking about the hemispheres. Those commissural fibers connect across hemispheres. What about association ones? It's within hemispheres. Yep, that was it. Association fibers tend to connect to different areas within the same hemisphere. So there's like a big one that connects Wernicke's and Broca's areas called the arcuate fasciculus. That's a big bundle of association fibers. Okay, those are the ones. Yeah, it's got two words in it. There's a small space in there. I should probably put in like more spaces. No, if I put in more spaces, it'll be harder to get accurately, I think. Whatever. Yeah, there's two words there. They just said, I remember that interview. Oh, yeah. I remember the interview where I was in with Anxiety. You're on your way to Savannah to eat at a certain restaurant. I remember that. And I remember that you were there. You and Red were both there. And I appreciated you guys. Or I think Kyle was too. I appreciated you guys for that. Yep, exactly, Griff. Totally. Dream Sandy said, actually, it's what I've grown accustomed to since grade school. Yep, everybody's got a secret society or cabal to live in. Kind of do, yep. I just don't expect a social life. Okay. I would say that it's out there for you if you want it. I've discovered that about myself too. I don't go out and try to get a social life very much because I'm happy with the small circle of friends that I have, but I know that I can if I want to, you know? I bet you can too. But if you're cool with where you're at, you're cool with where you're at. You're a grown-ass man. You got this. Can I use those? I wouldn't grift thingy, because that's just going to be something else for people to have to guess. This is all done through a bot, so like it has to be kind of a similar response. The bot isn't very good about seeing what people mean and what they wrote. So, and using a hyphen and stuff like that, that's just gonna, it would count the hyphen as part of the blank and not actually put a space in there. So, yeah, you totally can, Dream, if you want to. Like I said, it's there if you want it, and if you're cool, you're cool. So yeah, those are the kind of 5 general areas of dysfunction that I kind of found when I was looking through different studies on this. I'm gonna go back and review them real quick, just because it's been a while since we talked about the first one. There's that fear dysregulation. There is attention dysregulation, recurrent memories and dreams, differences in self-perception, and then differences in interpersonal attachment and coping as well. Okay. All right. All right. There's this. Okay. Yes. There's a link to our Discord again if you'd like to join us over there. Okay. I'd love to see you there. And if not, that's okay too. I feel like a lot of the people that are already here are already part of it, and that's great. I like that. PTSD is something you deal with for life? I mean, I would guess in some people it is. I couldn't say. Some people might go into remission, some people may deal with it the rest of their lives. I don't know. I couldn't say. It's gonna come down to the individual, you know? It can be toned down. It can certainly, I would say it can certainly be toned down, yeah. It depends on how much a person works on it, what their environment's like, what their social support network's like, you know, it's going to depend on a lot of different stuff. How predisposed to keeping those symptoms within themselves they are. I mean, it's going to depend on a lot of different stuff, but I would say the more you work on it, the more it's probably going to be manageable for you. Just like many other things. 98 members in Discord, almost to 100. It's true. We're growing a little bit every day. I like it, you know? We're just going to keep growing and snowballing, and eventually we're going to be big time, you know? Until then, I enjoy being here with everybody, you know? It's going to continue to get better and better at what I do. Provide more and more value and bring it on in. Indeed, Riff Thingy, right? Alright. Now, Delecta said, so from what I know, it's not really a thing you would ever call cured or gone. Yeah, it would be hard for me to believe that that's the case, yeah. It's coped with and managed, although I'm sure there's cases where the lines are blurred. Yeah. Yep. Smarter every day, TM. I like it. But yeah, since there's such, as we've been talking about, there's just physiological changes in the brain that reflect this disorder, it may not be something that ever goes away. You know, usually if there's a change in brain structure, that network kind of never really goes away. Like it's just like kind of like a long-term memory that you can't really forget, you know? That's stored in our brain networks as well, or in our the connections between our neurons. And that doesn't really ever go away either, you know? As much as we might want it to. It might get to the point where you don't think about it as often, but it's still kind of always going to be there, you know? Like my depression's not going anywhere. It's going to be with me the rest of my life. I know that. It's better now than it used to be. I'm not knocked out for like weeks at a time. What's this? This guy right here. Migmax coming on in with 4 friends. Welcome in, dude. Good to see you. Good to see you. My name, for those of you guys who don't know me, is Aina Beta. We talk about we don't just talk about PTSD. We talk about neuroscience, psychology, and other science topics here on stream. We also enjoy strategy and story-driven gaming. Okay, tonight we're talking about PTSD, and later we're going to play some Darkest Dungeon. Any of that sounds like your jam, we'd love to see you around again. Don't forget to hit that follow button and come on back sometime. Okay? As I was saying, like my depression, not going anywhere. It's just not going to, you know? It's better than it used to be. I don't have it for like weeks at a time anymore. But you know, it's down to like maybe a day or 2 at a time, which is way better than it used to be. I don't have thoughts of suicide as much or nearly as strongly anymore. I haven't tried, and since the one time I did back in when I was in my late teens, I don't plan to ever again. Like it's way better, but it's also not going to go. It's also never going to be completely gone, and that's just something I need to accept and deal with. It's going to be there. It's kind of my lot in life, unfortunately, you know. Yeah, exactly. It would be tough, node elected, and it's up to the individual. If they feel like they're not anymore, then they're not. You know, sure, cool. As long if they're not and they're not showing any deficits anymore, cool. Who cares? Like I mean, it's nice to put a label on something if it is an unknown collection of symptoms and you want to know what you're dealing with. But also, if a person wants to remove that label for themselves, if they feel like they've gotten through it, then fucking let them, dude. It's their label. It's fine. Yeah, Ninja said it's a lot. I would imagine it's a lot like other mental issues where it's better some days, worse other days. Maybe it gets better over time, but it's always with you. Kind of like I was describing. In fact, exactly like I was describing. Yep, actually, absolutely. Meg, welcome and dude, good to see you. Thanks for bringing your friends over, man. I appreciate you. You made it for actual neuroscience. You did. You did. We're talking about it. We've been talking about it a bit longer tonight, which is fine. This is what I want the focus of the stream to be. I'll spend hours and hours talking about it. I totally can. I love it. I love the interaction tonight too. I knew that when I was making this one, like this is gonna be one that we talk a lot about because there's a lot to it, and some members of our community have this as well, and it's something that's a popular quote unquote issue because a lot of people are invested in it and talking about it, not because it's a fun thing, but because a lot of people know about it and have opinions about it. So I figured we'd be talking about it a lot. And I like that. It's good. Griff asks, are PTSD triggers always a long-time influence from the environment, or can a short event trigger it? Yeah, it can be a one-time thing. It can be like a car accident, or it can be from a long-term chain of events. It can, Griff thingy, yeah. Griff says, yeah, like some mothers go through depression after or during pregnancy, and if untreated, it stays. Is this in some way similar? I couldn't say if this is similar that way to postpartum depression. I don't know. I don't know. Those are totally different etiologies, different disorders. I couldn't say how similar they are. I don't know. Sparky, welcome in. Good to see you, man. Glad to have you. Sharon, his wife had PTSD pretty bad when she got back from Afghanistan. Not a surprise. Absolutely. Yep. Is some days better than, or some days worse than others? Yep. But I'm hoping that, and I would guess that she's better now today than she was before, right? And she's only going to keep getting better as long as she keeps working at it. I would guess that if she was out in the service in Afghanistan, she's not a stranger to hard work, and she's going to keep improving. Yeah, as long as she keeps her mindset on it, she's got this. All right. Oh, jeez. I like hearing about depression too. Oh yeah, that's where I live. We can talk about that all day. That's a future talk as well as talking about the neuroscience of depression. I'll get there as well. Nodelectus says there's no real time length for how long a traumatic experience has to be. Nope. It can be seconds, it can be days, weeks, whatever. And Griff thingy, I don't think you were here for it, but we talked about there's a newer subset or subtype or type of PTSD coming around called complex PTSD. And that one's specifically due to a long-term chain of traumatic experiences like being held prisoner, or people that were in concentration camps. They may have developed complex PTSD from that, or long-term abuse as a child, or things like that. That kind of comes up with a separate subtype of PTSD that has more pronounced symptoms and more negative feeling towards oneself and things like that. So yes, there could be varying time or lengths of time that these traumatic experiences can take place in and still develop PTSD from. Yes. Yeah, Meg, is part of it. Depression's a big one. Definitely part of a lot of people's lives. Mental health difficulties in general is part of a lot of people's lives. I would say like I might be talking out my ass here, but I would say that the majority of people probably have something, some sort of, whether it be anxiety, PTSD, depression, something like that. Most people probably got something going on. I could be wrong about that, but I would say so. Oh, every night about this time lately. Let's get those frame drops. Sorry guys, we're back. We're here. I don't know what's going on with that. Just every once in a while, or every night around this time, we get those frame drops. I don't know what it is. But anyways. Ninja was saying, I read this story a while ago of someone who got back from a tour in Afghanistan, didn't have any symptoms of PTSD for 4 years, and it can happen later. It could be on a delayed trigger. Yep. One day I was driving down a country road, hit a pothole, popped one of the tires. I kind of woke up taking cover behind his car in a field telling police officers to get down. Yep, like I said, it can be a sleeper too. I don't think we mentioned that too much earlier, but there could be kind of a delayed onset of it. Yep, it sure can. No problem, Grifting. It's what I'm here for. She-Dork's still here. Cool. I'm glad to hear from you. Complex PTSD in her case. Okay. Glad you touched on this as well. Absolutely. It's hard to talk about, so really great to have somebody else tackle it. Hey, no problem. If this, I mean, the only things I want out of this is people gaining more knowledge, especially around neuroscience, psychology, how people work, and two, helping people. You know, this helps people to be more in touch with themselves and understand others better. Like, that's all this is for. So I'm glad that you're getting something out of this, She-Dork, for sure. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing your experience, Tom. You know, like, I'm sure that that's not, as you said, it's not difficult for you, or it's very difficult for you. So if I'm helping you to express yourself as well, I'm glad. That's all I want. All I want. Let's see. Hadn't heard of complex PTSD, but yeah, it's more recent. Yes, it is. One of our community members was saying it's already in the ICD-11 criteria, but it's not in the DSM yet. I'm guessing when they do the revision for the DSM-5, which should be coming in a year now, they're probably going to add that in there for sure. Yep, absolutely. Ethanol found a kitty. Hey, you're still here. Cool. Good to see you, man. Also, quest time for whoever's ready! Exclamation point quest to jump on that quest. Get this little fat boy a treat. He's waiting so patiently. Sparky says, is there any neuroscience behind which sense might have a stronger association to PTSD triggers than other senses? I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I would guess that it's given the centers where this lies, it's probably all of them. I mean, I don't know if there's going to be stronger for some people than others. It would probably have to do with what the initial event was. If it was primarily a visual thing or primarily auditory thing, primarily a touch thing. I don't know. It might have to do with that, and also just the way you're wired in general. It might be different person to person. I would guess that since so much of our brain is based on visual information, that those are going to have a lot of that's going to have a big salience to a person with PTSD as well. But I don't know if there's any sort of research that says one sense is going to more strongly kick off a PTSD response or a flashback or anything than others. I couldn't say. So like Ninja was saying earlier, there was a person that drove over a pothole and like popped his tire and just was not even immediately hiding behind his truck telling police officers to get down. And that was a primarily auditory experience, auditory and tactile. You know, I think it just has to do with not so much a single sense, but more that how similar a situation is to the situation that they received trauma from, or that traumatic experience. You know, the more similar it is to that traumatic experience, the more likely it is they're going to have a overreactive fear response from that. You know, that's what I would say about that. All right, I do see y'all took out Fang the Panther Disciple, which means this little fat boy right here gets a treat. Y'all get some kitty cam and a little oxytocin burst from this little buddy. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest kitty on Twitch. Whoop. There you go. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. It's a win-win-win. All right. So in learning about PTSD to teach everybody, I've learned that there are multiple networks or brain networks involved in this, which are just related areas of the brain that serve a certain function. Okay. That was my beep boop. Sorry about that. Ethanol found that kitty. What's a sleek black kitty named Fang the Panther Disciple? I love it. If Ninja doesn't get to you, I will do so in a second. No worries. But, like I said, there's some different brain networks involved in PTSD, or dysregulation of a couple of different networks. The first one being the central executive network. If you know anything about executive functioning, if you've heard that term before, you know that mainly lies up in the frontal lobes. There's a lot of activity for central executive functioning up in the frontal lobes. So no surprise, this has mainly to do with the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the posterior parietal cortex. So like kind of the back of our heads, back around here. Posterior parietal cortex. Shown here on this image of a brain. There's a large activation here in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and then some in the posterior parietal cortex, right? And this has a lot to do with, if you remember back to our talk about ADHD and the different attention networks, this is kind of similar areas to that as well. There is activation of the frontal lobes and the temporoparietal junction, or one of the attention networks that we talked about there, okay? There are just some similarities there. This isn't so much an attention network as it is executive functioning, but kind of in the similar areas. That's all. Just trying to make some connections for you guys. So, executive functioning is basically working memory, or basically being able to hold information in your mind and work with it. Inhibition, or not doing things that you don't mean to do. Task shifting, or just basically going from one task to another without difficulty. You know, not being stuck on one task when you know you need to move on to something else, or making sure that you do stay focused on a task when you mean to, instead of bouncing back and forth and getting distracted. Decision making, you know, what's good for me, what's not, etc. Executive functioning is a lot of different stuff. That's some of them. These are of utmost importance in ADLs, which are activities of daily living. Basically, you know, going grocery shopping, paying your bills, going to work, any of those things that are just basic things you do throughout the day that we often don't really think about as really, really important, but they kind of totally are. Some of the most important things you do are activities of daily living. And you kind of don't realize how much you would miss not being able to do them fully until you can no longer do them independently, or as fully as you used to be able to do. So this kind of thing can be impacted with PTSD, or ability to take care of these things can be impacted with PTSD and many other mental health disorders too, you know. Speaking from experience, you know, a person with depression isn't always the best able to take care of activities of daily living, or exhibit the best executive functioning either, you know. So, sorry. People with PTSD, they have difficulty with their ability to kind of shift between task relevant stuff and task irrelevant focuses. You know, they'll sometimes have a more internal focus. That's kind of where those not so much daydreams, but you know, the kind of rumination and stuff like that might come in. They aren't able to focus so much on what they're supposed to be doing in their daily lives because they're reliving those moments. They're kind of ruminating and stuff like that. That very salient focus for them, their trauma, is kind of taking their executive function abilities away from them and robbing them of that ability, because they're so much of their brain is just focused on that fear coming back again, or that situation coming back again. Yeah. So this is one brain network that can be affected or impacted in people with PTSD. And that kind of ties into that area of dysfunction we talked about earlier, you know, the attention regulation, things like that. So another area that is impacted is called the salience network. So, I mean, as the name implies, thank you for following, thank you for checking us out, appreciate you. As the name implies, the salience network has to do with looking out for what's important around us, right? And as you can imagine, having listened to me a bit about PTSD, that's the brain with PTSD isn't always the best at picking out what's important and what to focus on and maybe what's not, you know? There's the hypervigilance, there's that exaggerated fear response to what would often be seen as innocuous stimuli to most people. So there's definitely a difference in this network as well. And this has to do with two areas we talked about earlier. The dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. Remember, this helps determine what gets to the frontal cortex and what doesn't for conscious thought. And also that fronto-insular cortex. Yeah. So salience detection, and directing behavior to most motivating stimuli is kind of what this is all about. Figure out what's important in our environment and what we should be acting on to, you know, either acquire that, to get away from it, whatever, you know. And then overreactivity in this network is associated with some increase in negative feelings, as well as that hypervigilance I was talking about, overreactive fear response, things like that. There you go, Ninja, you got it. Not the middle ear hole. Just the middle ear, dog. Just the middle ear. Yeah, and then changing and functioning in this network can contribute to the hypervigilance of PTSD, like I said. And then something I got from a study was increased anterior insula activity, because remember the insula is part of our brain that helps us to feel those internal states, especially the negative ones, fear, guilt, shame, things like that. But increased activity in the anterior insula is kind of also associated with heightened interoception, or the feeling of bodily states, things like that, especially during states of emotional undermodulation. That's something we haven't talked about yet. But emotional undermodulation would be referring to that lack of connection, or that hyper dysregulation between the frontal lobes and the amygdala, the limbic system, so that you're able to kind of regulate your emotions and keep your emotions in check when you know they should be, right? Because again, people with PTSD often have those hyperactive fear responses, and also hyperactive other responses, other negative fear responses too. If they feel like they are threatened, or there's a trigger around them or something like that, they can have kind of a hair trigger for those kind of things. So that's another network that is that has been shown in Earth, that is thought in research to have some dysregulation within it. Okay. Also, the default mode network. This is one you maybe have heard of, maybe not. This one involves the medial prefrontal cortices and also the posterior cingulate. So that goes along with the anterior cingulate gyrus. This one has the posterior cingulate gyrus. And also the angular gyrus, which is an association area right by the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe. I didn't have a good picture of that, so I can't show you, unfortunately. Dragon coming in, is PTSD actually a disease? I mean, yeah. I mean, in so much as that there could be evidence of it after a person is gone, it causes a big impact in their life. I mean, it's not biologically based like through a bacteria or something like that, but it is something like that. Welcome in, good to see you. I would say it depends on what you want to say a disease is. Is it caused by like a foreign body? No, it's not. It's a disease like other mental disorders can be called a disease. Certainly a debilitating disorder for many people, though. Nodolita says, I think one thing that kind of goes unnoticed about the hypervigilance can, in a weird way, lead to a person with PTSD not noticing or remembering stimuli that isn't really worth something they're, or sorry, isn't really something they are hypervigilant for. Yeah, like if they're automatically like kind of on the lookout for something, they may not be taking note of it, but they're still doing it, right? Just because you're on the lookout for things, your brain's on the lookout for things, doesn't mean that you're necessarily conscious of everything that it's looking for. Not always. And no problem, Dragon. It's all good. Yeah, diseases usually refer to like things that cause like a definite physiological or anatomical difference in a person. There will be signs of it present after death, things like that. They're caused by, you know, foreign invaders in the body, things like that, or an overactive immune system or something like that. It's usually more biological in nature. This is not as much. The cause of this isn't biological so much, you know. Dragon says, my brother's in the military getting deployed to Kenya for the next 9 months. This is interesting. I hope your brother comes back safe and sound. I really do. I'm glad you find this interesting. I hope you learn. That's what this is all about. So the default mode network. Medial prefrontal cortices, the posterior cingulate. So the anterior cingulate closer to the front of the brain, the posterior cingulate's getting back closer to the parietal lobes and the occipital lobes. Okay. Angular gyrus, that association area between the temporal and parietal lobes near the posterior portion of the brain. The temporoparietal junction, which is going to be the kind of the crease between those areas, and the posterior inferior parietal lobe. So basically around a lot of area around the parietal lobe, as we can kind of see here. A lot of area around near the parietal lobe, and then the medial prefrontal cortex. So this this area is active a lot when we're kind of daydreaming, when we're not really focusing our attention on much of anything, when we're very, very internally focused. So self-referential processing. We're thinking about ourselves when we're kind of thinking back on a past experience, when we're daydreaming. All those things. That's when the default mode network is most active. And as anybody with PTSD might tell you, or you can imagine, this is probably there's probably a lot of self-referential processing going on. They're thinking about their past experiences and themselves in relation to those experiences a lot. Some would say too much, to a damaging point, you know? But that's just kind of how their brain works. It's very hard to turn that off, you know? No blame or anything. It's just, that's hard. That's what their brain does now. And you can improve that, but it's always going to be tougher, you know? Also goes along with that social cognition, thinking about yourself in relation to other people, which we talked about earlier. One of the areas of dysfunction in a person with PTSD is that negative self-perception, especially in relation to other people. So this brain network has to do with that as well. Also, autobiographical memory, or things that happened to you. Obviously an area of difficulty for people with PTSD, since, you know, those negative events that happened to them caused this. Yeah. Like I said, active during daydreaming and thinking about social situations, all those things. Activated really strongly during rumination, which people with PTSD are going to be doing as little as possible, or as little as they would like to be, but probably more often than they would like to be. You know, it's tough. It's very hard to get away from those negative events that they've been through. So, let's see. So increased default mode network interconnectivity, or increased pervasiveness of this default mode network, can be related to PTSD severity, right? So as there is a more connection of the default mode network throughout the brain, PTSD severity tends to go up, it looks like. And probably you're going to see more rumination on a person's part, I would guess. That's where the question mark is there. I'm guessing that's going to be the behavior that's associated with that. Connection between this default mode network and the insula has been used to kind of predict development of PTSD after trauma as well. There's a very strong connection between this network and the insula. It's more likely that a person might be developing PTSD, right? Because again, this is just going to cause more of that rumination, that comparison to others, that self-referential processing, all those things that tend to go a bit haywire and not really work for a person anymore in PTSD. Normally, this is a great thing to have. It just helps you think about yourself and others and think back on your past experiences. It's a good thing to have, but for PTSD sufferers, it's very difficult, or it makes things more difficult for them, for sure. Let me catch up on the chat here. Dragon said, I only took a Psych 101 in college. Okay. You work in computer science, so you like science stuff? You're welcome here. Appreciate you. And for those of you guys who don't know, any of you guys interested in not just neuroscience, but anything else, feel free to check out the Knowledge Fellowship, okay? There's the link to the Discord there. There's the link to the Twitter there as well. I'm part of it, and it's a big group of educational streamers that stream on a variety of different topics. It was founded by a biology PhD and I think a master's degree holder in geology. So there's geologists and biologists on hand. There's chemists. There's a lot of programmers. There's physicists. There's my friend Eva's in there as well. She does a lot of social science research and discussion about feminism. Anxiety is in there as well. She does a lot of mental health advocacy. My friend Mo the Bone Lady is in there. She's an animal skeleton preparator, so she builds animal skeleton not sculptures, but models and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of different stuff. Physics is in there too, Dragon. Go check it out. There's tons of different streamers in there to go check out for sure. Absolutely. A lot of S's, indeed. There it is. All right, let me catch up more here. To subscribe to the mental association model of the brain, would this be a buildup of a negative hormone response trigger from said stimuli? There's definitely dysregulation of the hormones within the brain of a PTSD person, as well as activation and, as we're going to see, size of different brain structures as well. Dragon, for sure. Does the government take care of these souls as soon as they're out of service? From what I hear, Griff thingy, there's a lot left to be desired. So, yeah, not as well as they should, in many people's eyes. Migmax is a physicist. There you go. Yep, there's another one. Ninja said, not pretending that I have PTSD, of course, but I experience what I would call hypervigilance. Okay, I notice almost everything happening in your environment. Don't feel like it's debilitating in any way, though. It's just the way your brain works. Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like you pay attention to a lot to what's going on around you, and really, like, are you more vigilant than other people? How would you know? I don't know. It could just be that your experience of that. I would say that you're probably within the normal range of that, just having to guess. I don't know. I find that I'm pretty detail oriented as well. I don't know. Certainly not in this range, like, at all. You know, it's not problematic for me. All right. Looks like I'm all caught up. Migmax answering that next neuroscience question. Hippocampus is definitely associated with memory. We'll be talking about that tonight. Speaking of the hippocampus, I think it's on this next slide, isn't it? Yes, it is. So people were asking, like, is there, somebody asked, can you see PTSD in a brain after death? I don't know. But if I did have to look for something, if you did look for something, this is probably what you would look for. One of the hallmark anatomical difference in a brain of a person with PTSD is atrophy of the hippocampus. Again, this isn't a bad thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with your brains, okay? This is just a difference that people have noticed, and the people that study this kind of thing, okay? But there's a definite atrophy, or a smaller volume of the hippocampus in people with PTSD. This is, like I said, is a hallmark trend. It's seen very, very often. Probably not in everybody, probably not in every single person, because there just aren't any absolutes in this kind of stuff, but for the most part, you're going to see that atrophy of the hippocampus, okay? And that could be associated with, of course, memory problems, difficulty probably with processing those traumatic memories. If your hippocampus is not working the way it's supposed to be, it can be hard to, one, re-experience those fully, and also fully consolidate those and move on from them. And also, because of that, difficulty with extinguishing that fear response as well. If you can't re-experience and connect with those past events as much as you would like to, or as much as you need to, it can be hard to extinguish the fear response around it as well. Okay. And there was a lot of hypotheses are going around. A lot of unsureness going around if this reduced hippocampal volume, is this due to the trauma? Did it happen because of that, or was it a pre-existing factor that predisposed people to getting PTSD? They're not sure about that, okay? But this is something that's often seen, okay? Nodelectus said, I will say I've always seen myself as hypervigilant. I think in addition to being on a whole different level, the hypervigilance with PTSD is also just very different to the way it's experienced. I'm sure, yeah, absolutely. Like he was saying, he's not trying to say he's got PTSD or that he knows anything about the experience, but he feels like he's a bit more vigilant than most people. He notices everything going on. Your experience as a person with PTSD, way different. Way different. Like, most people aren't going to be able to understand or connect with that. Part of the problem, you know? Part of the problem is that there is that feeling that people just can't understand that, you know? As much empathy as we can have, you know, it's still tough to do that. See, and I just say, I think maybe a critical component of PTSD hypervigilance is that at some unconscious level, you see everything as some form of threat. Well, and it's not so much that you see everything as a form of threat, Ninja. It's more that their brain is constantly looking for that same threat, you know? It's going to make those connections to new threatening things very, very quickly. One thing I didn't mention yet, and I'm not sure if it's in the writing or not, but one thing I mentioned is that the people with PTSD will tend to make new fear associations very, very easily, and like generalize that to their already traumatic memories. So something that used to not be fearful to them might suddenly become fearful to them because their brains made that association now, right? Which is another whole nother kettle of fish. It's also a big problem for people with PTSD, you know? Since their brain's always looking for, or on the lookout for that same threat, they're going to start to see it everywhere, you know? I do see you guys took out Sammy's snowshoe, which means oxytocin release, and this little fat boy gets a treat. You guys get some kitty cam. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest little kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it, I appreciate it, you all love it. It's a win-win-win. I'm gonna bring it to you, you little fatty fat. I promise. Just stay right there, I'll bring it to you. I'm also going to cover you up because I love you. Even though you bit the crap out of my hand last night. I love you. Gerbo's, oh yeah, I'm going to get there. Yes, Gerbo, I will get there, for sure. I got you. Griff said the feeling of isolation is one of the biggest obstacles in the recovery path in any mental illness. Yes, I would say so. Yes, the feeling that just nobody else gets it. And outside of the angsty teen, nobody understands me thing. No, more than that, like the true feeling of like, I'm alone with this. I would say when I was at my lowest low with depression, like I literally just kept like having the vision in my face of like, here's the planet and here's me. Like, I'm just not a part of this. You know, not only do people not understand me, like I'm not a part of this world. I don't belong here, you know? Very, very damaging. It really, really was. Absolutely. No to like the city. I can understand that. Just trying to trying to kind of bridge a little bit of the gap of knowledge. Totally. It's fine. Please do. It's hard to really describe it in a way that can really convey how it feels. It's basically impossible to actually do so. Thus some of the damaging parts of this disorder, you know, is that you don't feel like you can explain it adequately. I don't think it's in here, but another part I was reading is that there's a term for it, I forget, but people with PTSD will actually have some kind of disconnection with their emotions as well and have difficulty feeling what they feel and putting that into words sometimes. They hit a specific word for it. I forget what it is, but that can happen. Like they can't describe it, you know? Hey, Griff Thingy. Peace out, man. Peace out, man. Thanks for being here. Thanks for that positivity. Thanks for your additions. You're always welcome, man. Good to see you, dude. Sleep well. Disassociation? No, it's not that. It's like alexithymia or something. Is that the word? I think I might have just thought of it. Alexithymia, I think is it. That sounds like it is. I'm gonna look it up. Is it alexithymia? I think that's it. But that's something that can happen with people with PTSD as well. Yeah, there it is. It's alexithymia. Yep. That's the one. And they're unable to, or at least a kind of an inability to describe and feel and talk about their emotions is because they can't put it into words, you know? It's like Notolectum might be feeling a little bit like that. Like, I can't describe this very well. I don't think anybody else is going to understand. Like, that's kind of part of it that goes along with it, you know? Another dangerous part of it, you know? And just said one thing I'd be interested to see is if there's an increase in hypervigilance in veterans of recent wars, where sometimes the line between civilian and hostile isn't clear. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, yeah, I think if you detect threat anywhere, you're going to be set off, so it wouldn't surprise me at all. Dragon says, do you subscribe to the happiness is a quartet of hormones? Oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins? I don't know. I think that's probably a working theory. I wouldn't say that's anything unifying or absolute. I couldn't say, man. I would say those are chemicals that are associated with making us feel good, but not listed in there are things like endocannabinoids. Those also make us feel good. There's a lot of different stuff that can, you know? Some people get those adrenaline rushes, like people feel good off of those. So, I mean, wait. Yeah, I get epinephrine and endorphins mixed up sometimes. I meant epinephrine, yeah. Some people get rushes off of that too. They like the adrenaline, and that can make people feel good as well. Norepinephrine can also be associated with making you feel better. That's why SNRIs and not just SSRIs are associated or prescribed for depression anymore. So, exactly, totally, Dragon. Yeah, I love spitballing like that. Totally. Don't ever feel like you can't bring that kind of stuff up. I think I don't think it's that simple. I think there's more to it than that. Notolectus said, talking to Orange, and one big thing for him, can't say it applies to everybody with PTSD. May not. It's not just not just increased situational awareness. In fact, you feel like you're less aware in some weird sense, but more on guard and sensitive to some stimuli. Makes total sense. Probably the things that your brain has associated with that trauma, right? But other times, as like we were talking about with the default mode network and stuff, you're going to be kind of less aware and kind of sucked into that rumination and stuff like that, whether you're really conscious of it or not. You know, you may find yourself just thinking back on those kind of things and not really meaning to or wanting to. Detached, yeah. No, it's okay, Notolecta. I think I get where you're going. I hope I do, and thanks for sharing, dude. I love it. Not only are we learning from you, but you're doing well for yourself talking about that. Let's see. Original Funk Boy, good to see you, man. How you doing? Welcome on in. Glad to have you. Stumbled in here and found something relevant to me. Cool. I know I'm a bit late to the party. Hey, we're just in the middle of it. Don't worry, dude. What is PTSD? Okay. Is it like in the movies or something more? Something more. Something more. I would say that, I mean, anybody here who has PTSD, feel free to share. Have you seen good representations? Is it represented well in the media? I would guess that no, it's not. Like many other mental disorders. Thank you, Dragon. I appreciate that. You live with your girlfriend who has PTSD. Well, God bless you, and I hope she makes a recovery as much as she can and continues to live her life and stuff like that in the best way she can. So, hard for you to know how to deal with it. Just be patient, dog. It's the same way you can deal with anybody else that has PTSD or any other sort of mental health disorder. Just be patient with them, be there for them for what they need, and be prepared to stick it out. It's not always going to be easy for them, just like it's not easy for you. You know, I would say that they're never intentionally trying to make it harder for you, you know? Oh, totally original. Yeah, totally. I'm not trying to imply anything different, just it's going to take a ton of patience, dog. And she's lucky to have somebody, you know? Just saying. Okay, so one second. I do see that Dragon gave 100 biddies. We're going to do a little Fat Boy wheel spin, and I'm going to come right back to that question, okay? Little Fat Boy. We get a wheel spin here. Every time we get a tip like that, we do a little Fat Boy wheel spin. See what Fat Boy gets or what I get. Sometimes I get a chomp. Oh, he gets a belly rub. Those usually don't result in chomps. Thank you, boy. Oh, get to pet full Fat Boy's softest, most luxurious belly. And he just really wants some face pets. I'll give them to you. You good boy. Okay. Better not land on chomp. Usually the ones he gets from the wheel spin aren't nearly as bad as the one I got yesterday. But anyways, original Funk Boy. So PTSD, we talked about this earlier. It is an array of changes in the brain that go along with a traumatic experience. No need to talk about what your girlfriend went through. That's her business. But she went through some sort of traumatic experience in the past, and now her brain works differently. You know, there's some differences in her brain. Things that are associated with that are hypervigilance to fear, or also overgeneralization of that traumatic experience to other things. She can be easily triggered into negative emotional states, and it's not really under her control. There's usually within people a connection between the frontal lobes and the limbic system that can help us to kind of tamp down fear responses and other negative emotional responses. And in most people with PTSD, that connection is kind of weakened or dysregulated. So it's harder for people to calm themselves down when they're in a very strong negative emotional state, which in people with PTSD, those negative emotional states ramp up super high, super fast. So not only can they not control it as well, but it's also way stronger. It's kind of a 1-2 punch of just garbage that people have to deal with PTSD. So that's part of it. Also, there's a lot of this can kind of. I'm just going to go back to it. I'm just going to go back to it and show you. Here we go. Fear dysregulation we talked about right now. There's attention dysregulation. People with PTSD spend a lot of time either hypervigilant for threats in the environment or internally focused, so that robs them of their attention for other things that they should be focusing on. It's much harder to direct that kind of thing. Recurrent memories and dreams, flashbacks, nightmares, things like that comes up as well. Differences in self-perception. They'll often rate themselves as lower efficacy or just worse people, unfortunately, in general, especially in comparison to other people. This probably goes hand in hand with comorbid depression that a lot of people with PTSD experience. And then difficulties with using interpersonal attachment for coping or forming interpersonal attachments to begin with. One thing we were talking about with people in chat that have PTSD is other people just simply don't get it. You know, they just don't get what you're going through. And thus, if you feel like another person doesn't understand, and also if you feel like you're just less of a person than other people, so much harder for you to form those bonds and connections with people. Even though this is probably one of the most important things for a person with PTSD, this helps a lot, is forming those attachments and coping with other people, using other people to help them cope, right? So, dreams about dreams. You saw dreams, yeah. What about dreams? I'll go back. Right here. Recurrent memories and dreams is a big thing that happens to people with PTSD, right? So often have memories of the traumatic event, and it's thought that those aren't able to be consolidated efficiently because of differences in their hippocampus, which we were just talking about. The hallmark brain difference is a atrophy, I guess, of the hippocampus. There's a smaller overall hippocampal volume. So people aren't able to kind of consolidate those memories as efficiently, those traumatic experiences, and that's probably part of the reason why they keep reliving them. The brain's trying to process those, but they just can't do it efficiently. So it comes back and back and back as much as they don't want it to, you know? Yeah, that's the thing. She has nightmares like every other night. Yep. And, you know, the best thing you can do is just kind of help her through that, you know? Try and be there for her as best you can, you know? Try and help be one of those interpersonal attachments that she can benefit from, you know? You're not hijacking my show at all. You're fine. Absolutely. You're not. Are there any studies with autism and PTSD? Probably, but I didn't read any when I was making this. There probably are. Absolutely. If you search that term, like autism and PTSD, and then put NIH for National Institute of Health afterwards, you'll probably find, if there has been a study done by the National Institute of Health, you'll find it's likely open access and you can read it for free and it'll be right there for you. And you can guarantee, usually it's going to be really good quality research because it's through the National Institute of Health. That would be the best. That's where I would direct you. Okay. National Institute of Health is a great place to learn about any of this stuff. If you guys are interested for pretty much any topic. Let me catch up here a little bit. Ella says, none of the cats I've owned have ever liked belly rubs. Oh no. Yeah, little fat boy loves them. Loves them. Love them so much. He lick, he do. He got clean. He clean boy. And to say one thing is interesting about the human condition as a whole, we're very good at feeling things, huh? We're terrible at telling other people what we're feeling. I would say so, yeah. And I don't know if that's humans or if that's current society, you know? And yeah, we're really good at feeling negative things, especially that negativity bias I talk about a lot, you know? We're great at feeling, thank you for connecting. We're great at feeling and experiencing negative things and remembering and holding on to negative things, less so for positive ones, for sure. Holgren, welcome on and good to see you. PTSD is a very personal experience. That may be a correct interpretation. Mm-hmm. It is, yeah. Traumatic experiences vary greatly between individuals. We talked about that in the beginning of the talk, yeah. It's going to be very subjective, you know. What might be a traumatic experience for one person may not be for another, you know. That's why there isn't really a concrete definition like what's a stressor, what's a trauma. It's agreed that like all trauma is stress, but not all stress is trauma, and it's kind of going to come down to some personal interpretation there. Yeah. Let's see. Yep, let me catch up here. Yep, there it is. Dragon shares again. One of the first things they taught us in Psych 101 is don't self-diagnose yourself. True. Yep. Every psych student does, though. I was there too. When you start reading about these mental issues, there's a tendency to think you have them all. Yeah. Yep. Bearded Dragon was sharing that, like, hey, you know, I see a lot of these things in myself. I'm going to talk to my therapist about it. Please do. Like, there is that thing, like, hey, you know, don't self-diagnose yourself, but also, like, don't not look into something if you feel like there's something going on. Do that, you know? If you're already seeing a therapist, like, bring this up with them and talk to them about it. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what they're there for. Definitely investigate. No harm's going to come of that, I would think. No to like to say, I will say, though, nobody ever feels bad about not being able to understand. You simply haven't experienced it. Oh, he's telling you, yeah, don't ever feel bad about not being able to understand. Yep. You simply haven't experienced it, and I, for one, am glad most people don't understand it. Not something you would wish on anybody. Totally no delecta. I get you. Thank you for looking out for us. I can speak for myself and say I can't feel bad about not getting it, but at the same time, I so want to, you know, I want to be able to empathize with other people more. One of the ways that my depression manifested when I was growing up is like I don't feel things as strongly anymore, and like I want to, you know, like one of the ways I coped with it growing up and got through the crappy parts of my childhood and teenage years were like I just shut off my emotions, and like they just haven't really come back on since then. So like, yeah, you know, I don't feel, I wish I could empathize more, but it's hard for me, you know. That's a different thing. It's my thing, but like, I think that, yeah, I appreciate you looking out for other people, and I hope that other people don't feel bad for not being able to connect with you and other people more, for sure. True. Yep, there could be that too, Ninja, yeah. And of course, original Funk Boy, absolutely, I'm happy to help. Absolutely. It's a conversation here, hell yeah, it is, Gerbo. I love it. This is what I want every night, you know? It says that like I'm talking about something that's important to you guys. I'm making content that matters. I've touched on a topic that matters to people. Like, this is what I want, you know? This is the good learning. This is the good talking. This is the good discussion. This is it. This is it right here, you know? Gerba said, one of the things I like about it is Beta is very open to discussion, answering questions. Absolutely. That's what I've always wanted. Yep. I think some of the best learning takes place when many people are sharing that information, kind of like the scientific community is supposed to be doing, and does in a lot of respects, but then also totally doesn't in a lot of respects, you know? Like, and information like this shouldn't be privileged. Part of the reason why I go research this stuff and bring it to everybody is because I get it, I love it, I understand it, I'm passionate about it, and I want to bring it to you guys so that you can experience some of it too, you know? But for a lot of these kind of things, there's an education gap, there's an education wall. Like, you have to really be trained in this kind of stuff to get it easily, or more easily. There's a language barrier too. Like, academic language is not easy to understand. Like, read a research journal, it's freaking hard to understand if you don't have a background in science, you know? So that's why I want to make it more conversational like this, so everybody can have access to it. It's a critical flaw in language? Maybe. I don't know what you're talking about. I missed that one, Ninja. Too far back, sorry. Well, Bet Dragon, yeah. That's interesting they had that background. I'm glad you got that experience, yo. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. Oh, you're talking about being able to express emotions. I don't know if it's a flaw in language. It's more just a flaw in society. I think it's people can talk about what they feel like. They're less likely to do so, not because they don't know how, but because they don't know how socially. They don't feel comfortable doing it. You know, I think it's more like that. There could be a little bit of that too, Ninja. You can't, I guess, adequately, or you feel like you can't adequately describe your emotions, but you still talk about the experience. I think maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe a person isn't the best at describing their emotions, and also they don't feel like they're comfortable doing it either. Could be that too. That's good stuff, Dragon. I'm glad you found something that works for you, man. Yeah. And living in places where it's dark for a lot of the year, high incidence of depression for sure. Yep. Might have one of those lights that works for you too. I side eye in the scientific community in some ways. It can be better for sure. I think that it should be truly open access. Like, we shouldn't have to go pay stupid journal fees and all this crap, and it shouldn't be written in academic jargon. So the people that paid for it, like, most of the stuff is publicly funded research, and people can't access it because they can't pay for the journal that it was written in, and two, they can't understand it because you wrote it in almost a different language. No, come on, no, it shouldn't be that way. In my opinion, it shouldn't be like that. Bearded Dragon says, so I'm not sure if it's related, but over the years I've had very negative experiences where when I've had to deal with other people, and so as a result I tend to stick to myself. I don't really have much interest in interacting with other people. That was me for a long time. Yeah. You try to put yourself out there, but you have a hard time doing it. Well, you know, I mean, I can't say if you have PTSD or not, but I mean, that's definitely a negative association you built up in your brain. Yeah. You've had a lot of negative experiences with people, and now you just thought, screw people. You know, maybe I'm happier without them. That's how I felt growing up. You know, I had a lot of negative experiences with friends and other people growing up, and I was like, fuck, I don't want to be around. I don't want to be around anybody for a while. You know, after I moved out of my parents' place, I lived on my own for a couple of years. Like, that was some of the happiest times of my life, just being by myself. I loved it. You know, I needed that time. I came back, and I'm a more social person now. I feel like I'm better equipped to handle it. But I just needed that time to be on my own for a bit, you know? Mink says, yeah, too real. Yep, reading scientific journals are deep and require prior understanding. They do. And they don't need to, you know? They don't need to be written like that. Like, scientists can write that in lay terms, in plain speak. They can do that, but they don't, you know? I don't know why. Yeah, you know what I mean by research journals too, Dragon? Yeah, I bet you do. Yeah, best friends in genetics, and showed me his research on proteins, and I was like, yeah, okay. Like, yeah, I know some of these words. Sure, yeah. Like, it doesn't have to be written that way. It really doesn't. Or, like, sure, have that, but then also define the terms. Like, you can't, I mean, if it's a scientific, like an academic journal, sure, it shouldn't just be written for other academics. It should be written for everybody. Or, thanks for checking us out, appreciate you. Or write an academic one, but also like have another version where like this is what we're saying, but in a language everybody can understand. You know, make it accessible for everybody. So like the people paid for it, let them have it. It's silly, in my opinion. Ah, I see. What kind of lights? Oh, Dragon. There's like those lights you can get that kind of mimic sunlight, and that's supposed to help with seasonal affective disorder or like being exposed to dark for long term. A friend of mine who went through a lot of depression had one of those and used that for a while until he kind of got back on his feet with it a bit. Said it really helped him. So you can look for like there's lights that mimic daylight used for that. You can probably Google it and find it. All right, Evelyn. I don't know, this might go for a while still, Evelyn. I think you might be back by the time we're done. We'll see you soon, hopefully. Layman section should be read before the abstract. I would say so, yeah. It's like a simple, like, here's what it's about. Here's here's this, the articles I love the best are the ones that are like, here's a synopsis of all the sections. Like, here's the introduction. Here's a short blurb about what we did. Here's our results. Here's the discussion. And then here's the whole journal if you want all of it. I love the ones like that. It's so good, you know? Because that's what the abstract is for as well, but I think it's even better parsed out than just an abstract. You know, you can see exactly what it's about. It's in simple terms, you can understand. Everybody can understand it. Like, I think that every paper should have something like that, in my opinion. Yeah, Original Funk Boy, they are writing for each other, but they should also be writing for the general public, because again, the general public is paying for most of this research. They don't have access to it because it's written in this different language most people don't know, and thus it's inaccessible, and I think that's wrong. I see you guys took out Snoop's heart nose, which means, oh my gosh, he's so comfy. This guy gets a treat. Y'all get some kitty camp. Fats, I'm gonna bring it to you. Stay there. I'm gonna bring it to you. Oh my gosh. I mean, you ruin your comfort if you want to, man. Sun mimicking light. There you go. That's the one. That's the one. I hope that helps you out, Dragon. I've heard good things. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping this guy the fattest little lab assistant on Twitch. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. That's a win-win-win. Enjoy that oxytocin fix, guys. Oh, what a good Bowie. Let's see. Vegan says, Vegan Gains only has a high school education. Wait, what? It's good at reading. Who are we talking about? I don't know what you were talking about there, dude. I missed that one. It just says, light really bothers me personally. I much prefer the dark most of the time. Yeah, but you're not, like, suffering from depression either, I would think. I don't know. Or you don't, I mean, yeah, I don't know. You might not be in the same situation that Dragon's in, you know? I also prefer the dark, but that's just me, you know? I love it. Make sure, praise that light, dude. Praise that sun mimicking light. Do it. Anyways, let's get back to this. Let's do it. So we talked about the hippocampus, that, whoop, who's that? Who's that? This guy right here. This guy. Dragon connecting to the neural net, dude. Welcome in, my new friend. It's been a pleasure getting to know you this evening. So glad you stopped in. Feel free to check out those sub perks down below. As you have now connected to the neural net, you are privy to all of them. And also, Dragon, if you'd like to provide as much information about you as you would feel comfortable doing in a whisper to me about where you are in this wide world, I would love to add you to our submap, okay? Like I said, whisper, click on my name in chat. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. You can whisper me that way. One, for your own privacy, and two, because if you tell me in chat, it doesn't save a record of it, and I'm going to forget by the end of stream. But if it's in a whisper, it's saved, and I can see it later. And I'll be also what color dot you would like if you would like to be added. Be happy to add you. Okay. Hey, nice emotes, right? Love those. Good old Ina Beta nice emote. That's our most popular one, I would say. It used to be the Fats Beard because that's the only one we had. But since then, since we got this new emote, dude, this is the one, baby. This is the one. And again, this is going on now. If you guys, since there is a brand new sub, is Dragon. If you guys have 500 BDNF, just like Orange Ninja did, feel free to give 500 BDNF to Dragon and be entered in a $5 Steam gift card drawing tomorrow, if I remember to do it. It's at the end of every week. So another way that I can give back to you guys, and you guys can connect with one another, okay? Got you, Dragon. Got you. I will add you after the stream, okay? All right. There is Orange Ninja's next entry into the bucket. There it is. Anybody that can give 500 and wants to, go ahead and do it. And around here, The new subs are the VIPs, so Dragon, enjoy being a VIP of our channel for the next month. Okay? Yeah, I see that Migmax has also entered himself into the drawing. Connected more strongly with the Dragon. I appreciate it. Boom. And Gerbo. All right. There's Migmax's ticket right there. That's going in the bucket. Got a lot of entries this week. I like it. That means more new people joining the neural net and more people being generous with a BDNF too. Speaking of BDNF, we're going to have Fat Boy's birthday tomorrow. You guys can spend some of your hard-earned BDNF. I'm making him a late-night snack of sausages and cheeses and salamis. He's going to freaking love it, okay? I'm going to set up those commands tomorrow, or tonight, so you guys can use your BDNF to buy him those things, okay? Here's Gerbo's new ticket going in the bucket. Now, just say I feel physically exhausted, much faster than normal in a situation where you're in bright artificial light. Probably just you. Oh, I don't know. I bet you're not alone on that. No. Environmental changes can affect a lot of people differently. Little fat birthday boy, indeed. He's turning 13. He's an old man. My best buddy. Okay. I swear to God, we're actually going to finish talking about this sometime tonight. Not in a rush, though. I know people are really enjoying it and learning from it, so. Anyways. So we talked about the hippocampus being not underdeveloped, but atrophied some in people with PTSD. That's the hallmark symptom of that. There's a difference in the size of the hippocampus, okay? There's also, surprising nobody if you were here on Tuesday, a dysregulation of the HPA axis, or the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gland axis, right? That is responsible for setting off our sympathetic nervous system response in response to fear. Again, like if you've been listening about PTSD and you know about that that stress response, no surprise that that's dysregulated. It's gonna be hyperactive for sure. Also, there's a dysregulation of the hypothalamus pituitary thyroid axis, which one is one we didn't talk about. But the thyroid is also another part of our body. It sits right here in our neck, kind of folds over the larynx, the bottom part of the larynx here. That's another part of the body that the hypothalamus and pituitary gland control. And this one has to do with systemic not endorphins, but what's the word I'm looking for? Hormones. So, so dysregulation of these two things, along with what I thought was kind of counterintuitive hypocortisolism. So underactivity lower levels than you would think of cortisol, right? We're talking yesterday if there's a lot of stress in a person, they have higher levels of cortisol. You would think for people with PTSD, they would have very high levels of cortisol, but it's actually the other way around. They tend to have lower base levels of cortisol. And they're saying that this is probably due to increased sensitivity of the hypothalamus and pituitary glands. Remember from Tuesday that cortisol levels in the body, the cortisol ends up re-entering the brain, or entering through the blood-brain barrier and binding to the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland and kind of down-regulating their action, right? But if there's increased sensitivity to these, increased sensitivity to these, there's going to be less cortisol needed to activate them. So they're always going to be kind of running at a higher level, but with lower levels of cortisol in the body at the same time. So there's still a high fear response to things, but lower overall chemical messages that are going to regulate that response as well, as it kind of forms its own negative feedback loop. Again, it seems very counterintuitive. I was very surprised to see that, but it is what it is. So. There's also some potential dopamine and norepinephrine dysregulation, and this may have something to do with the overactive fear response and difficulty controlling their attention. Dopamine and norepinephrine both have to do with paying attention to things in your environment that you feel are finding those salient things in the environment and attending to those things. And as we talked about earlier, that's dysregulated in people with PTSD. You're hypervigilant to those things you're fearful of, and have difficulty with controlling your attention the way you want to in general, right? Potential increase in serotonin levels, we talked about that, also may be associated with hypervigilance also. People with PTSD often present with higher baseline blood pressure, Heart rate and skin conductance, getting there, Gerbo. These are measures of a stress response, which makes no sense. It makes total sense if people are constantly high-strung and in fight or flight mode very often, then they're going to have higher blood pressure and heart rate. Like that just kind of goes along with it, right? Just like a person who's chronically stressed. Skin conductance is basically a measure of stress response as well. It's kind of, they measure how much you're sweating on a surface of your skin, because sweating or increasing your skin conductance is something that they would something that they measure stress with as well. You might see that term, or it's synonymous with another term used in literature called galvanic skin response. That's the same kind of thing. It's a measure of stress. They'll use that as kind of a low-key way to gauge a person's stress response in a situation. Oftentimes, like social experiments, they'll like put a little sensor in a person's hand, and they can get the skin response or the skin conductance from that. As a result, if there's like a little bit more moisture put out, that's seen as a increase. That's going to increase the skin conductance, or the ability for electricity to travel through your skin and be measured that way. And that's associated with higher levels of stress in a person. Just another way to measure, another marker for stress. Lie detectors use skin conduction too? Yes, good point. Thank you, Mig. Yes, exactly. So skin conduction, yeah, similar to lie detector. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So same kind of thing. Again, skin conductance or galvanic skin response, they're both used interchangeably. Another one of those terms that they use interchangeably but mean the same freaking thing, and it's just confusing. So Gerbo says those don't work though, because any stress can set them off. Again. That's why they are not always the most accurate thing, you know? In theory, it makes sense that they would work, but I mean, if you're already high strung, what's it going to find, you know? Okay. Did I skip one? Oh, I didn't. All right, here's some statements I kind of put together that kind of bring everything together. Okay. So increased levels of norepinephrine coupled with hypocorticolism, or those lower levels of cortisol. Paradoxically, in my way of thinking, I just don't understand it the best that I should, I feel like. And also reduced hippocampal volume. So those three, that trifecta of garbage, may contribute to increased encoding of fearful memories. Or sorry, it should be reduced encoding of fearful memories. Sorry, coupled with reduced inhibition of fearful memory recall. So those fearful memories kind of keep coming back up and up and up again, which leads to those flashbacks, increased association of novel stimuli with fearful past events as well. We talked about that, where there's if there's you have those stress responses, that trauma, and you're going to, or people with PTSD are going to start to associate that with other more novel and less dangerous situations in their everyday life as well. Trifecta of garbage, indeed. Yeah. And sorry, yeah, this should say decreased encoding of fearful memories, not increased. Sorry about that. So, also overreactivity of the amygdala for the fear responses. That's been seen in people with PTSD as well. And again, reduced connection to the frontal lobes of the anterior cingulate, which is supposed to impair the fear and inhibit fear responses in the amygdala. After we see that, yep, it's okay, I don't need to be scared anymore. That's supposed to be there to kind of tamp down that fear response. But again, dysregulated in people with PTSD, so they can't do that as effectively. No, they don't want to. Their brain literally won't let them do it. Very frustrating indeed, I would guess. Together, again with that reduced hippocampal functioning and volume, that's that's what's going to promote that paranoia, the hypervigilance, the overactive fear responses, and then again the attribution of fear responses to stimuli that shouldn't be seen as fearful, right? Kind of like Ethanol was talking about earlier. You know, he's been in firefights, been in situations where if he leaves his base or the camp or whatever, he's in danger of being shot. And now he feels like when he leaves the house to go take his dog for a walk, he kind of can't shut down the feeling that he feels like he might get shot at. Like it just can't help it. You know, his brain's doing that. You know, he's been in such an intense situation. His brain can't shut that down now. It can't dissociate between those two things. It's going to be overreacting. It's hypervigilant, and it's trying to look out for him, but it's making it maddening at the same time. You know. So unlearning these things and older fearful associations is going to be exacerbated by the lessened connectivity between the prefrontal cortices and those limbic structures, right? So not only does the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, specifically the amygdala and the hippocampus, kind of control those fear responses, but that's involved in the fear extinction process as well, or learning that something isn't scary anymore, right? Because that's, again, as we talked about, not a passive process. You don't just forget that something was scary to you. Oh no, you'll remember if you're given the opportunity to do so. But you have to actively teach yourself and show yourself that it is in fact not scary, right? And I'll say it doesn't help that I live in a shitty neighborhood and people have actually been shot in my complex. Well, there's that too, right? No wonder you feel that way. One, there's probably some real danger of that, and two, you've been in firefights. That's not helping at all, man. Jeez, sorry to hear that, man. That's not great for you. Sorry, it's no good. Alright, so that was a lot of information about PTSD. Again, feel free to answer any or ask any questions just like you have been. Always happy to talk about it. So, treatments often revolve around some sort of therapy, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy is a big one, and SSRIs, or treatment with medications like SSRIs. I would guess they probably also give anxiolytics. I'm not sure exactly what kind of medications they prescribe, but therapy and medication, those are what you go for usually, right? There's other stuff though. There's other stuff that's in research that is being looked at and considered and seems like it could help, seems like it would help, seems like it should help, right? One of them being mindfulness, meditation and mindfulness, right? Often talked about with mental health. In PTSD, it seems like it could especially be helpful. Okay, so what this does actually is it can enhance your attention, especially being present and focusing your attention where you want it to be. Again, something that's very difficult for people with PTSD to do because they're spent so much of their energy and mental resources are spent on processing that past event and ruminating about it. They can't focus their attention where they mean to focus it. This is a way to actively process that process, right? Let's see. Oh, yeah, this typically shows increased activation in the anterior cingulate cortex, which is again one of those parts of the brain we talked about with people in PTSD that is underactive or not functioning the way it's supposed to, right? So this in theory should be able to promote activity there and help a person to focus the way that they mean to focus. This can also kind of improve or is thought to be able to improve emotional regulation and reduce stress via that frontal limbic activation, right? The building those connections between the frontal lobes and the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, and also increase that connection, right? That connection that is so important to regulating your fear response and other emotional responses and promoting fear extinction, right? This is something that in theory, or as some research has shown, should be able to increase that connection and hopefully help that person get some of that function back again, right? This may also alter some of the pre-existing brain structures involved in self-referential thinking, like the insula, and self-awareness, right? Including awareness of emotional states. This should help with the emotional processing piece of it as well, the rumination piece, the self-efficacy piece, hopefully. And yeah, so this might be remediating, or good to remediate function of both the salience network, just the salience network. Now they're thinking that if it affects a certain brain network, it should be the salience network, right? The one that helps us look for salient stuff in the environment, right? But it sounds like this can help with a lot of aspects of PTSD, just by engaging those frontal lobes and really focusing your attention where you mean for it to be, engaging in your emotions without necessarily feeling those emotions. For those of you who don't know much about mindfulness, that's really what it is. It's a form of meditation where you think on things and really focus your attention where you mean for it to be, push away distractions gently. You're trying to remain emotionless as much as possible, where you're going to feel emotions come up, accept those, feel that they're there, note them, maybe think about why, and then let them go, where you really just try to kind of tamp down whatever emotional reactions you might have to things. Probably very difficult for many people to do, I would say, especially for people with PTSD, but having working with a therapist and maybe possibly or some research is saying that this can help as well. Might lead to increased results. Don't know. Like I said, these things seem to offer some promising potential, but direct links haven't been made yet. But it's something, I mean, this certainly isn't going to help a person if they go try this, you know? This is something that a lot of people are looking at for sure. Oh, I love it, Ninja. He's screaming at you. Oh no, nobody got the myelinated axons. Oh no, Bearded Dragon was close. Yeah, myelinated. They had the myelin sheathing on them. That's the one. Myelinated axons. That's the one. Myelinated axons is hard to spell. It's true. That's why I have the, you know, accept some flubs setting on the quiz bot, but those weren't close enough. Not close enough. Also, quest time for whoever's ready. So yeah, mindfulness. That's one thing that's being looked at to kind of supplement therapy and medications in PTSD. In fact, I've heard some stuff on the radio, you know, some soldiers trying it and some having some really good success with it. There's also, you know, like a lot of people just say mindfulness simply doesn't work for them. That's okay, you know. It works or it's been shown to have some efficacy in other mental disorder or other mental health difficulties as well. Depression, anxiety, things like that. Some people have really benefited from that there too. But it ain't gonna work for everybody. Just like no one treatment's gonna work for anybody for anything, you know. The ACC, Gerbo, the anterior cingulate cortex, when we talked about earlier sometime. It's the part of the brain, a part of the brain just posterior to the prefrontal cortices. It's gonna kind of be a gatekeeper for what makes it into your conscious thought and what doesn't. Anterior cingulate cortex. And also, I see this little fat boy gets a treat. Y'all get some kitty cam. Hey, buddy. Oh, wake up, buddy. Cingulate. That's the one. There you go with the C. Yes, that's it. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. It's a win-win-win. Well, comfy boy indeed. Of course, Gerbo. That's what I'm here for. No worries. In fact, we've been talking about this so much tonight. Let me get a good picture of it. Something I should have put in here, actually. Hey, don't take it away. You just had the option there for me. Anterior cingulate cortex. There it is. I'll bring it on over now. This is public domain, so we ain't got to worry about it being copyrighted. That's out of grays. So this is the anterior cingulate cortex right here. This whole thing is the cingulate cortex. So the part back here, we're talking about the posterior cingulate cortex earlier. That's back here. The whole cingulate cortex is right here. So there's the normal, like typical cortexes we've been talking about. Here's the prefrontal cortex, all that. Rest of the frontal cortex, parietal cortex, or somatosensory cortex, right? But below that, there's this demarcation here, this very sharp gyrus here, or sorry, sulcus here. And then below that, this is a separate structure called the cingulate gyrus, right? So, what even is kerning to this guy? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Yeah, this is the cingulate cortex here. Okay. Let's see. Is there another better picture? Yeah, there is. This is also Creative Commons, but here's another picture of the cingulate cortex. Okay. This is an fMRI of a real person. Here's the rest of the cingulate cortex. Okay. Posterior will be back here, of course. And this is probably the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex here. But this is it. And here's the corpus callosum. We talk about that a lot. Corpus callosum is right there. Cingulate cortex sits right on top of it. Not actually myelinated axons, but actual cortex, so cell bodies or somas. That's that. And then these are the lobes. This is the inside lobes of the brain instead. Okay. Picture is painful to look at. Oh, kerning is the term for the space between the letters. Oh, got it. Yeah. It's an old picture, man. You get what you get, I guess. They live on the edge. I mean, back in the days of gray, maybe they did. It's hard to make those pictures. MDMA is another thing being looked at for possible treatment of PTSD. Okay, MDMA, also known as ecstasy. Okay, the street drug ecstasy. I don't have the whole thing out there. So cool to have the MRI views along with this conversation. I should have had more of them. I don't know why I didn't do that, She-Dork. Sorry, I usually do. Most of the time I have more pictures of what we're looking at. This time I didn't, and I don't know why. I really should have. I think if I do this in the future, I'll add those pictures in, like, hey, we're going to talk about these areas of the brain a lot. Here's pictures of them. I should have done that more, but I'm still new to this, you know? I'm making all these from scratch, so I kind of have to learn as I go. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, ecstasy is another thing that they're looking at, or I guess I don't know, they're the same thing, but they usually in the literature they call it MDMA. That's what they're looking at. Someone say ecstasy? Yep, sure did. They're looking at using this as what they call an adjunct to psychotherapy or therapy. They're looking at using this alongside of therapy. Okay. So, yeah, it would be called MDMA assisted psychotherapy, right? They've actually done a really good study on this. There was a meta-analysis, and they cited some of these really good gold standard type of study, which is a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. Let me tell you what that is. Oh, it's not trails. What am I doing? Anyways, let me tell you what that is, okay? Randomized means they are randomly assigning people to groups, which is greater experimental control. And they're probably going to match them as well based on different characteristics, male, female, age, background. You want to match them as much as possible and then randomly put them into groups, okay? So you would match people up, and then like one gets assigned to one group, their match gets put into another group. And you do that so on and so forth. And that's seen as greater experimental control, so you can't say like, oh, well, one group was all female, one group was all male. Well, no, we made sure that they weren't, right? And then double blind means that neither the participant of the study nor the person administering the drugs knows what they're getting. Like nobody knows what the pill is. Some of them, since it's placebo controlled, some of the people in the study got just a sugar pill. They got like just nothing. And some of them got an actual ecstasy pill. Okay? But again, nobody who was administering the medication knew who was getting what. They had people kind of set the pills up before. That person knows, but then they didn't administer the drugs to the participants. They had another member of the study do that, and they didn't know what was what. Right? So nobody knows who's getting what. That removes a lot more bias as well, because if you know what you're giving a person, then you're going to kind of expect to look for a certain thing. But if you don't know what they got, then it's assumed that you're going to record and look at data more objectively. Okay? And I would assume that this doesn't just go for the people administering the drugs to the participants, it would go also for the people administering the data. They would know who's who either. So they're just looking at what's what, and then later the participants will probably be coded so that when stats are run, they're run with less bias, and then afterwards they're put into a format so you can see which group is what, and then they look at the results that way. So like I said, this is kind of the gold standard kind of trials that they do. If it's available, stuff like this where you're just giving one group one thing and withholding it from another, it's easier to do this kind of test or this kind of experiment. And that's, like I said, kind of seen as the gold standard reduction of bias and highest experimental control in studies. All right. So it's cool that they actually have this says that the results that they've gotten out of these studies are really, really valid, right? Because they've done everything possible, or most of what's possible, to remove bias and expectation and stuff like that from the study. So they looked at this. They looked at, like I said, they did this study. There's an overall remission rate of 66.2%, and low rates of those adverse effects were found in six phase 2 trials conducted in the clinical settings with 105 people. There's a pretty big sample size, 6 different studies conducted with them. 66% remission rate, really high. This seems to be very, very, very effective to go along with psychotherapy for people. But unfortunately, this is an illegal drug, so not everybody has access to it. Science is really trying to work on getting this, or making this, another avenue of participation for people, or another avenue of therapy for people that have PTSD, because the results just seem to be so strong. You know? So again, results support that MDMA can be effective along with psychotherapy. Very effective indeed. So what does MDMA do in the brain? Well, it includes an increase in, listen to these, we talked about these earlier, right? MDMA usually causes an increase in oxytocin, which tends to be downregulated in people with PTSD and is a very important neurohormone in forming those bonds with other people, and also can help control that fear response. So this increases levels of that. Prolactin, which we didn't talk about at all, and then cortisol, which tends to be lower in people with PTSD. So bumping those levels up is going to cause more of that negative feedback loop back to the hypothalamus and pituitary gland and downregulate their action, which should hopefully reduce that stress response, or that kind of chronic stress that people have with PTSD. Okay. And also, let's see, it also kind of changes the levels of serotonin in the brain as well. And there's most of these things, besides prolactin, we didn't talk about that one. These things are all things that are dysregulated in the PTSD brain. So, no, it seems no wonder just looking at that it would have some sort of beneficial impact on people that are that have PTSD and are going through psychotherapy. Right? That seems to be the method of action. That's what's driving those good results that people got, that researchers found in those earlier studies. Okay. So yeah, that's something that's being heavily researched right now, for sure. Welcome back, Draco. Good to see you, man. The 11th hour has begun. Oh, it's true. We'll be playing Devil May Cry 5 soon, man. Also, oxytocin itself. That's being looked at as possible treatments as well. Not only is that being looked at as a possible treatment, like first of all, they give it to you intranasally. Basically, they have you sniff it, kind of like a nose spray or something like that, for allergies. Okay, that's how they get oxytocin into your system. So they use this not only as an adjunct to therapy as well, in certain studies, but also there was a study that I found that showed administration of this given to people with high acute stress coming into a hospital, coming into an emergency room from, I guess, violence of some sort or car accidents or whatnot. People that came in experiencing these and seen as at risk for PTSD showed a sharp reduction in PTSD symptoms, including their increased fear response being kind of tamped down some. When oxytocin was given multiple times, they found that when they only gave it one time, they kind of expected to see positive results, but no, they actually found the opposite. It made them worse. So giving oxytocin multiple times seemed to tamp down whatever PTSD symptoms that those people were to develop, right? And I didn't put it here, but they noticed that their symptoms stayed reduced for the next 6 months. Okay, so this seems not only effective at helping to treat PTSD in people that already have it, but in people where you suspect it might happen, it also seems to help prevent that or lessen the impact of it going into it. Okay. So yeah, other studies looking at oxytocin as possible treatment for PTSD, and cool. I think I liked this mindset that it had there, where it widens the circle of us. Remember, this helps build bonds between people, helps people be more social, and that's something that is dysregulated in people with PTSD that have trouble connecting with people, especially over their trauma, right? Which makes it that much more difficult to treat and get over or manage, right? So this drug helps to widen the circle of us and shrink the circle of them, right? Helps kind of bring people together more, as this being the quote-unquote bonding molecule or the love molecule, right? So that, I believe,